All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome back after a week off to Blue Sunday here on In the Blue Corner channel. This is Vince Lochisano, and of course, accompanied by the one and only Stephen Khatib. And Steve, we've finally got you to be our driver, I guess, in the control room. It's not quite the Bat Cave like it is with Beachy, but I believe you're going to be controlling things for us during the course of the show. How are you,
good, thanks. I've got my diploma from the cornflakes packet in how to control the technology. I think I've got a certificate that's being printed as we speak that'll go on the wall.
Yes, and of course you were trained up by the best educator in the business, who's got government contracts flying left, right, and centre in Bangkok, Thailand. And I speak, of course, of our Grand Poobah Joe Lutzer, who I'm not sure if he's watching right now, but a big shout out to you, Joe. And the main reason for that is because Joe actually turns the big 6-0 tomorrow. So happy birthday, mate. We hope you have a wonderful day and hopefully get some time off to enjoy it amongst all of your busy educational programs that you've got going up there in Thailand. So all the best to you, Joe. I'm sure you'd like to wish Joe a happy 60th, Steve.
I certainly would. I'm sure he's busier now than he ever was, and if you can
realise how privileged you were during the week to get an hour of his time to get educated on how to control this show.
He didn't have one of his professors educate me. He educated me directly himself. So I was very good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very good. That's a bit like getting the Education Minister James Merlino here in Victoria to give you a personal tutelage on how to pass Year 12. In the state of Victoria, all you got to do is turn up because apparently everyone passes.
Oh God!
Anyway, I won't go down that route. Steve, it's been a massive week in sport. In fact, we weren't on here last weekend, mainly because of my absence, but also because of a couple of other technological issues. But a big evening to Sandra McDonald, who's just wished us a big hello. Of course, there's been lots of events take place in the world of sport all around the world, and we'll be trying to cover as much of those as we can over the next couple of hours. But, of course, principally being an AFL program, and, of course, it's all heating up now with lots of issues starting to raise their heads in the world of AFL, and that's what our show's all about, the Carlton Football Club, and trying to give all of our viewers a bit of an insight as to what's going on down there. And, of course, this show's mainly discussing some of the more contentious issues in football, both at AFL and AFLW level. So that's what we're going to start off with tonight. Of course, there is a big match about to take place here in Melbourne with the tennis, with Medvedev and Nadal going for it tonight for the men's title. I personally couldn't care less because I think it's meaningless, seeing Djokovic wasn't allowed to play. But I just wanted to say a fantastic result last night in the women's singles, and Ash Barty, what a fantastic result, not only for her, but I think for this country to get behind a true champion. She's just immaculate the way she carries herself and the way she speaks publicly, and of course, more importantly, the way she plays the game, and a true sports person, sportsmanlike behaviour on the court. You never see her put a foot out of place, and fantastic result last night. Ended up winning in straight sets, but geez, it looked like it was going to be a three-setter at one stage, down 5-1, but she's like a true champion. She fought back and ended up taking it out in straight sets. What did you think of the game last night, just quickly?
Yeah, I thought the same. It was almost like it was meant to be when she came back. She's still 5-1 down, but she was still playing reasonably good tennis. So it wasn't like she was on the canvas or anything.
But
I
think a lot of us probably thought, look, this looks like it's going to 3 sets now, and she might be in trouble. But she wasn't prepared to concede, not even a point, let alone a game. And then Danielle Collins might have thought, I'm looking like getting this second set. The first player in the tournament to take a set off Ash Barty, but she still managed to go through without even losing one set for the entire tournament. That is an amazing achievement, isn't it?
As I say in horse racing parlance, Vince, the class difference was certainly there, wasn't it? It was
the cream rose to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, good luck. Valiant performance from Collins. I think too, right? Was she 27th in the world? So you're not exactly at the same level of Barty, but still, wasn't disgraced in the final at all.
No, it was a great match, and both girls really carried themselves beautifully through that. All right, let's talk Carlton. Before we talk about the men's team and some of the things that have been going on during the week in relation to our men's team, of course, we had the AFLW team play a match today against North Melbourne, of course, at Icon Park. And disappointingly, we lost by 5 goals. 3 goals, 3-21 is all we could manage against North Melbourne's 7-9-51. So losing by 30 points or 4 goals, 6. There was only 6 shots for goal versus 16 to North Melbourne. So a comprehensive victory. Did you watch the game?
I saw the highlights, Vince. As Sandra has just mentioned with her comment there, I don't want to talk about it. Well, we will talk about it. We will talk about it. It needs to be covered, I think.
It does.
Talk about outclassed. Well, certainly Carlton were outclassed, and it was only like one team playing out there. And look, we haven't even touched on Tuesday's effort either.
Well, I was just going to say this comes 5 days after losing 9-9-63 to 4-4-28 to the Brisbane Lions up there on the Gold Coast. So, again, 18 shots to 8. Today, 16 shots to 6. So we're giving the opposition 10 shots for goal, scoring shots, at least 10 scoring shots more than we're kicking in both of those matches. And it looks like we've got some serious problems in the girls' team in terms of making finals. I'd say it's looking pretty forlorn at the moment. 1 win and 3 losses after 4 rounds. Things are going to have to turn around in a fairly significant way to make the finals, you'd think.
True, but did you think? And I'm not. I'll be frank. I'm not an absolute technical expert on the all the players in the AFLW. I follow it and look at the style of play and like. But for mine, we weren't the most talented team. Were you expecting them to make the finals this year?
No, I'll be honest with you. Despite all the hype, the usual pre-season hype that you get from the club, I was concerned when I saw how many players were exiting the club. That was my biggest warning bell that was sounding in my ear. When I knew that Taylor Harris wasn't going to be there anymore, when I heard that one of the co-captains, Katie Loynes, was gone and going back to GWS. Alison Downey went to Collingwood, and even in recent years, and of course the last-minute request by Jess Hosking to go to join her sister at Richmond, her sister Sarah, who left the previous year. And we've seen other good players leave, like Bree Davey go to Collingwood, and we've only got something like 5 of our original game changers, as they label them, still on the list from when we first set up. And that's a hell of a turnover of players in, 5 or 6 years. So, the warning bells were ringing loudly when I saw these top players leave, and we weren't replacing them with other players that were just as capable and just as experienced. So it's going to take a while for some of these replacements to get up to the level, I think.
Is it the departure or the lack of replacements, or a combination of both? I think it's a combination of both.
I mean, I think to start with, when you've got players of that ilk departing in the first place, that should automatically be generating questions. Why? What's going on here? Why this exodus? Have we got a cultural problem at the club? Have we got morale issues within the group? Is there really a team first mentality amongst these girls, or are they all starting to fracture into little cliques? Because that's what tends to happen in teams that are not performing and not really operating as a team.
Well, when the girls go to another club, though, let's be honest. Maybe in the Taylor Harris situation, although we don't exactly know, it's not like they're going for big coin here.
No,
it's got to be environment. It's got to be an environmental factor why they'd like to leave. Yeah, sure. So,
and not only that, Steve, you see the way they're playing. It's a bit similar to our men's team insofar as when they leave, they seem to be playing better football. So, what does that tell you? You know, Bree Davies, brilliant at Collingwood. I think she won effectively the women's equivalent to the Brownlow after she went to Collingwood.
Yeah.
And sadly for her, she's gone down with a knee injury, which she sustained against us, funnily enough, in round one.
The first early in the game,
You know, even you know, players like Taylor Harris seem to be totally rejuvenated and have found themselves a new purpose and a role that they can play within the team at Melbourne, or that she can play. So I don't know, but even some of our players that have traditionally played well, like Darcy Vecchio, not playing at anything like the level that we've come to expect.
But Sandra mentioned, and in one of her comments I just had on screen previously about Daniel Harford, the coach, maybe needing to depart the scene. Well,
I've noticed that. I don't know about you, but I've noticed that there's been some fairly strong calls from certain quarters around the club already after 3 and 4 matches. In fact, they came after last Tuesday night's match calling for his head. It doesn't take long for the vultures to start wanting to pick at the carcass.
Is that the Carlton way? I'm asking a rhetorical question. I know the answer, but it can't just be Daniel Harford. It can't just be him.
Of course not.
I'm not suggesting
just one person.
Yes.
It never is just one person.
So to hang, draw and quarter and publicly execute him after a handful of games or less than is, I would suggest, I think it's not good for the culture of the club. It's not a good example to the players, and it's not getting to the root cause of the issue.
No.
Even if Daniel Harford is not going to be there next year, I don't think just every coach that leaves us in any, whether it be in our men's program or female program, has to leave in this public execution.
Yeah.
And it's almost like
sad.
It's almost like, look, we hung them up in the town hall, in the town square, and
just push the carcass of David Teague aside and put another hook on, and we're about to hang another one.
And
it's like a conveyor belt.
And because the club or administrators within the club perform the execution, they're applauded for doing it. But no comments are actually made to say, well, hang on, you presided over these people while they were in the role.
Yep.
What support did you give them?
Yep.
And what other people around them influence this as well? Again, I'm not suggesting Daniel Harford has no blame in this at all. I'm just simply posing the question. I think
ultimately he does bear ultimate accountability, as most senior coaches do, for the performance of the team. And quite often they do cop it in the neck when, in fact, the root cause of the problems is not the coaching itself at all. It could be in the recruiting. It could be in the trading. It could be, even higher up within the club. Yeah. We've seen the toxic nature of the culture at Carlton and what it's done at the men's team. Well, what's to say it wouldn't have done the same thing within the women's team? When they conducted that review in June through till August last year, why didn't they include the women's team at the same time? Why just the football department of the men's team? Why not the football department of the women's team?
Well, that's a good question. And
why aren't the same things potentially happening within the women's team that were taking place in the men's team? I see no reason why that wouldn't be the case.
I think we've also had a significant turnover of administrators on an annual basis in the women's program as well. Whether that's par for the course of the industry, because it is somewhat semi-professional environment compared to a fully elite professional environment that the men have. But there is certainly a significant staff turnover behind the scenes, and that raises major questions to me. Anyway, well, watch this space.
Watch this space. While we're on the...
we'll continue to talk about this every week, won't we?
Yeah. One of the other issues that popped its head up on the AFLW side of things during the week, which we might as well see, we've discussed the women's team and their subpar performances in the last couple of weeks. We saw an Islamic GWS player come out during the week who spoke to her teammates and made a stand and declared that she would not wear the pride jumper. She couldn't do it on religious grounds, went against her religious beliefs, and therefore she stood aside from playing in that particular round with that particular jumper. Now, from what I can see, she's been fairly roundly applauded for all of this rather than condemned in the same way that a rugby player called Israel Folau was condemned some time ago for simply reading out a scripture out of the Bible when he wasn't even anything to do with football or rugby. But of course, because he declared this particular section out of the Bible, which was talking about amongst lots of other types of people in society, gay people, he got condemned for that, and contract ripped up, and even people such as the CEO of Qantas threatening to withdraw their sponsorship of Australian Rugby Union if he wasn't dismissed, and all sorts of things like that. So they heaped on him, they jumped all over him. The minute it's a Christian belief or someone who expresses Christian beliefs, they get torn down in flames. But it seems to be not the same case for other religions, and in this case, in particular, the Islamic one. What's your view on this?
I don't think the AFL environment is. I think this is new ground here. This is new ground. I know the Israel Folau case. I followed it very closely. Yep. This is new ground. I don't think anybody knows how to deal with it. It's very.
But why see the point I'm saying is I'm not necessarily condemning how she's been treated. What I'm now reminding everyone of is a similar situation where another player in another code or another sport, simply reading a scripture, gets torn down in flames. You mentioned the public execution, and yet I think he was unbelievably, unfairly treated. Back at
they called Folau's comments, even though they were from a biblical source, hate speech. They defined that as hate. How can you
define that as hate speech?
Why
hasn't that particular clause in the Bible ever been condemned as hate speech before? Until he said it, it was never even referred to by anybody. But all of a sudden, a rugby union player comes out and says it because that's his particular. And all of a sudden, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, Steve. Someone tried to ring me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello?
Yeah, I've got you, Vince.
I don't think maybe you can see me or hear me, but I can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Back onto the show.
I'll jump in. Okay.
I'll get out and come back in.
Okay.
It won't be long, mate.
We'll just wait for Vince there, but essentially, it's a very, very awkward situation, isn't it? That's occurred, and an extremely challenging one for the AFL and the AFLW environment to deal with. As these games continue on and grow strength in the following, there will be more and more of these situations that will occur, and they will. We've got you. We've just got Vince back in now. Vince, you're back with us.
Sorry about that. The The religious police are coming after me.
No.
I don't know what happened. Someone tried to call me. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll just caveat our conversation here. Essentially, we're not talking. We're debating the merits of the issue. We're not giving an opinion regarding beliefs or wearing jumpers or whatever. Right?
We're talking about why isn't the same treatment and the same reaction given to someone who believes in one religion versus someone who believes in a different religion, but effectively espouses the same thing.
Yeah, so I would say that Folau tweeted comments from the scriptures. Okay, so they were defined as hate speech. Whether you agree with that or not, it's another story.
Absolute rubbish. Yep.
Anyway, yep, and not wearing the jumper was not. There was no speech. It was more, I don't believe in it. Now, is that an indication of
of hate? What do you mean you don't believe in it? You can't deny, right? This player for GWS can't deny that people exist with that particular sexual orientation or various different sexual orientations that aren't heterosexual. So the fact that she's not prepared to wear the jumper that represents those people says that she is against that particular or any of these LGBTQI people and anyone that belongs in that sphere.
But how much against?
She rejects because of her religious beliefs, wearing something that represents them. She can't deny that they exist. She knows that they exist, and she told them that I acknowledge that you people do what you want to do, and I respect the fact that you have the right to have your own sexual orientation, but she just doesn't believe in it. And because she sees herself as a future Muslim leader, she doesn't believe it's in her best interests to be running around playing football with a pride jumper on, because it doesn't represent what she wants to represent.
Well, she believes it would.
Now, if that was Israel Folau saying, "I'm not going to wear a pride Guernsey that the Australian Rugby Union decided to wear," right? He would have been shot down in flames because he is Christian. That's my point. This society is going down the road of persecuting Christians for anything and everything. Even if you have Christian beliefs, you're automatically, targeted and attacked about priests that are pedophiles. Well, just because a few select priests happen to be pedophiles, and they should be arrested and charged and put behind bars, absolutely. I'd even do more than that. But that doesn't mean that everyone that believes in the word of God, who has a Christian belief, is a bad person, or that they should be attacked and targeted for their Christian beliefs.
Yeah, but I think look, I don't know whether it's to do with my opinion is I think it's a very challenging situation. I don't think the AFL know what to do yet. They've played both sides of the street on this one.
Well, what did you think of Carlton? This is a show about Carlton. What did you think of Carlton's response on their website? Or I think they might have put out a tweet, or they might have put out something.
I didn't see that
on the website.
No, I didn't see it.
Well, I haven't got it right here in front of me. Maybe someone else can send it to us. But basically, that they believe that there should be continual discussion about this issue. So they took, they sat on the fence in the end, and apparently they were targeted and attacked for that position of sitting on the fence. They said that they supported, the LGBT community and all the rest of it, but because of what happened, they encourage continual discussion. So they decided not to take one side or the other and sit on the fence. And they were targeted, of course, by the lunatic left for sitting on the fence.
I'd say, Vince, we're going to need to.
Extreme left is what I mean to say.
This is a whole topic for another show. I think on this one, we are going to need to move it on.
Yeah,
I would say that. I would say in summary though that I believe that the AFL is trying to appeal to as many people as possible, to get their hearts, minds, and more importantly their wallets, essentially
during the plebiscite in 2017, the AFL didn't hold back in supporting one particular vote versus in the yes vote versus the no vote when it came to the whole gay marriage plebiscite. They even changed their logo at the front of AFL House so that the logo didn't say AFL, it had YES. I mean, how much more blatant do you want than that?
Well, that's where I was going. I think that they're supporting lots of causes. Some people, there's lots of conflict too, because if you support a cause on one hand, there's almost an opposing cause. That's a great example of an opposing cause, or there are opposing views, and it's very, very difficult to pick a winner. And the only way to do that is to say we value continuing discussion, which is a beautiful comms.
Taken the barbed wire stance.
It's a beautiful comms.
They got one testicle either side of the barbed wire, Carlton.
that was cooked up in a comms meeting, I'm sure. But look, it is a challenging one. I don't have all the answers. I think we present both sides of the story, but as observers, it's going to be interesting to see as this gets more and more. This won't be the first and last time this occurs. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in future.
Indeed. All right. Well, I'll be very interested to follow that one. The player who wouldn't wear the Pride Guernsey. Let's see what happens there, and see if anyone else who decides to refuse to wear it of a different religion gets treated any differently. Anyway, we also saw training open up in recent, the last 10 days or so. We've had 2 training sessions being made a massive deal out of. I mean, it's almost like a box office event. They made it a ticketed event. You had to go in and, get a ticket and register with your vaccination certificate and all sorts of things. And all of about 200 people turned up to the first one.
Was there a density cap on it?
We would have had more people at the Bunnings barbecue there on Saturday. Of course, I want to touch on
January
and another one on Saturday on the 29th.
Yeah, I want to touch on that. So, and I know I know by mentioning this, I'm going to wind you up. So just don't buy a gasket here, right?
Doesn't take much. Doesn't take much.
But essentially, and call me old-fashioned, but you'd go to training, and as a member, it was your right, not privilege, but right, to stand there, freezing, cold.
In winter.
Jackets, layers, whatever. Or summer, it would be 40 degrees and you just had to get a glimpse of the players, right? And they'd be training and whatnot, and you just turn up and that would occur, and you'd socialise with fans, talk about all the positivity of a new season brings. He's looking all right, he's flying, training the house down, never been fitter.
Now, how many years are you going back now? Are you going back to the 80s or the 90s? Because I tell you what, in the 2000s or later, more recent times, the same people that used to love going to training in the 80s and 90s, they're not going anymore. They haven't been going for 20 years.
Yeah. So what happens then is, the club had a fabric, a culture to it, a sense of community, not a manufactured community
it had a social club for a start.
Yeah, it did. So that's what would occur, and you'd watch the players train, and it started up where, look, we're working on some real tactical drills here now, and if you want to see us beat Collingwood on the weekend, we're going to have to shut the gates. Yeah, and then you'd have people in trees and the binoculars, and Alistair Clarkson, I remember at one of the trainings at one of another clubs hiding all different. Someone rented a unit near VFL Park so they could watch Hawthorn train.
Yes, indeed.
And the like. Then now it's become training is closed.
Yeah.
And we're going to now give you back a right to attend and watch your players train. And we're going to call it a privilege. We're actually going to call it a privilege. And we're going to market it like it's a movie cinematic screening or something where we're going to have to sell tickets to it. I mean, give us a spell. Seriously. Like that is ridiculous. The membership hasn't gone down. Princess Park is our club.
Yeah.
It's not it's our supporters' ground. It's not an administrative building that you need to scan into. It's our supporters' club. And they should want supporters to frequent there, buy a coffee or pie, whatever, look at the trophy cabinet, think about the good old days, maybe reminisce, look at the memorabilia and whatnot.
Yeah.
And they should want supporters there all the time. And essentially, you should be watching them train whenever you want, barring, I understand, there's tactical stuff that they do. And they normally do a lot of that, that simulated sort of stuff. A lot of that happens in the gym now, and they set up the indoors. Now, people are probably going to comment, this new facility is going to fix all that. They'll be able to do all those things, and members will come back.
Yeah.
Look, this is ridiculous. This marketing, that is selling fresh air. That is absolutely selling fresh air that you have a right to. And I just think it's an insult. Anyway,
what makes me shake my head is almost the how can I describe this? The frothing at the mouth that some supporters have about just watching players run around at training. I just don't see what the big deal is, to be honest. But then again, whatever floats your boat. I've never been seduced, if you like, by the prospect of going to watch, all these guys train. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. If I'm there, I'm there. If I'm watching them, great. Good to see that they're in good nick. But every team's got players that come back in pre-season and they look more muscly, or they look more built, or they look like they're running more freely compared to the even if the previous year. I mean, it's no different anywhere else.
Vince, you're being logical now, mate. Even if this is the romance in football, okay?
Yes, I know.
This is football is you're being too clinical, right? Essentially, football is people, emotion. Your tribalism.
I was just going to say, it's all
your tribalism. It's your tribalism. The logo on your shirt, right? Your fellows, a sense of belonging, and that.
And that's all great.
And look, players, you don't get to see them. You see them from the grandstand, but especially the higher number players that normally the recruits or fringe players that you don't get to see a lot of. You want to see them how they move. You want to see that, and then you want to hypothesize and dream. You want to dream a bit, don't you? As a supporter, that's what you want. Now, if I'm marketing the club, I'm promoting as much community interaction as possible, and that element. But I'm not saying, it's the Coburg drive-in and you've got to buy a ticket. Do you know what I'm saying? That is an insult.
Yes, I used to be able to see the Coburg drive-in where I used to live. Did you know that?
Yeah, the Kodak factory up there.
Yeah, North Coburg, behind the Coburg Lake.
That's it.
Yeah, we lived on the corner of a court that led up to this industrial area behind us, and you could see the Coburg drive-in behind. So anyway, nevertheless, that's by the by. Yes, look, I think you're right. I think I think people just like to get caught up in that whole,
but that's good.
Anticipation of a new season, and they get all optimistic and they start to drink the Kool-Aid and maybe we can make finals this year, and we brought in this player and we brought in that player, and that actually leads me into our next discussion around the annual general meeting and the thinking behind the timing of the annual general meeting. But we'll get into that in a moment. Let's just finish on the training session itself and the announcement during the week of our new leadership group of only 3 people. I can't help but think that Brian Cook might have had a say in that. Rather than all these 6 and 8 and 10 player, leadership groups, they've decided to just go with a captain and 2 vice captains. What did you make of that announcement during the week?
Couldn't be any worse than what was going on before, could it?
Well, obviously, Sam Docherty stepping down from the captaincy altogether.
Yeah.
Whether that was totally his decision or whether it was suggested to him, I'm not really sure. But
that was circumstantial.
Only Sam could tell us that. And he's probably not going to, say anything other than, no, it was my decision. But nevertheless, the decision's been made. So the club has to come up with something. So, look, to make Patrick Cripps the only captain and to have Wiedering and Walsh, who are clearly the next 2 in line for the top job, by the announcement of them as vice captains, I think that was that was a sound announcement. I'm pretty happy with that. What
I'm trying to say is it didn't work with the larger group for whatever reason. It didn't work. So
I just personally think that the whole concept of co-captains was flawed. I never liked it, or we've never had it before. I know Grant Thomas, happened at other
Grant
clubs,
Thomas and Paul
Roos, some premiership teams that have had 2 and even 3 captains. I think the Sydney Swans might have had 3 captains in a premiership year once. But that, I don't know, it just never sat well with me that at Carlton we would have dual captains. I like the whole idea of the one main captain, and we're going back to that tried and tested and proven method, haven't we?
Yeah, and look, I think it's a strategic one. I don't think you can blame necessarily any of the players in those previous leadership groups as such. It's more just a strategy, and I think they've narrowed it down to the best 3.
Yeah.
And look, good luck to Sam Docherty for next season, and I'm, let's hope he firstly his health.
Yes, of course, naturally,
and then secondly, he can return to his football.
He's been through a lot.
Absolutely.
Even with his ACL injuries too in recent years, where he was out of the game for a couple of years.
Yeah, we forgot about that, didn't we? Well, you tend to forget about that.
He's been through hell, really. I mean, he's only 28. He'll be turning 29 this coming October, so not getting any younger. He'd be thinking to himself, geez, I hope we can play finals this year and maybe start challenging for a premiership in the next 2 or 3, because I don't know how much more time in the game he's got. I mean, not everyone gets to play till they're 33 or 34 or something. A lot of players only finish up at 30 or 31, maybe 32.
Absolutely.
I know Ed Curnow's 32 at the moment. So, is he playing in his last year at the club this year? Who knows? Could be. He's the only player in his 30s. I'll put it that way. I think it shouldn't come down to age. I think it should come down to performance. And if you've performed, it shouldn't matter what the number is beside your age. It should be all based on, output and performance and accountability as a player.
Speaking of performance, Gina, good evening, Gina.
Hi, Gina.
Daniel Medvedev is won the first set.
It's meant to be. Anyway, misspelt it, or she's had too many Chardonnays already.
No, we know. Yeah, we know what you mean. Yeah.
Yes,
anyway,
we know what you mean, Gina.
Don't worry. Yeah.
Yes. It looks like the Russian's taken the first set, has he, from Nadal?
Would that be a popular set? Do you think the crowd would be cheering that, Vince?
I think Nadal would probably have the best of the crowd tonight.
Yes, I know he would. Yeah.
And Medvedev would probably have the majority of Djokovic supporters behind him, I reckon.
Yeah.
Seeing Nadal came out and condemned Djokovic for not getting vaccinated, I think the Djokovic supporters would be out in force supporting the Russian. But anyway, let's not get involved in those.
You're starting to get wars. It. We're going to have a Cold War now. What are we going to anyway?
Yeah, the Eastern Bloc is alive and well. All right,
okay.
Well, Steve, only in the last 48 hours or so, out came an email from the Carlton Football Club announcing the date of the annual general meeting, and to go with that, there will be also an election because an independent person has put up his hand to be considered for a board position, and he's been through the process of the Carlton infamous Independent Nominations Committee, which is the most non-independent nominations committee you could ever think of or dream of, by the sounds of things. And he has stuck to his guns, and he will be putting himself up for election at this AGM, or before the AGM, because everyone has to vote in advance. And the annual general meeting itself won't be something that any of us attend. It'll be done online. How convenient. COVID, of course, is being blamed for this. Nothing could be more suitable for our current board than to have a COVID-affected situation where they can just do everything online and not have anyone attend. But anyway.
I just want to jump in there. You say he's stuck to his gun. Yeah, you say he's stuck to his guns. What, are you saying that the club or the Independent Nominations Committee would have a history of trying to talk people out of standing if they've nominated?
Well, mate, Steve, you have stood for election. Why don't you answer your own question? You of all people could tell all of us what experience you had with the Independent Nominations Committee and the strong-arm tactics that they try to use to either talk you out of standing or making you feel like some sort of treasonous, treacherous Carlton supporter for even daring to stand for election up against these well-credentialed directors who all have the required skill sets to be on the board, but you don't. So why don't you tell us, do you think that the Independent Nominations Committee is independent?
Definitely not.
Right. And I think you'll find that Bedri
Sanofsky,
who will be putting himself up for election, will have an interesting story to tell. I have spoken to him, as a matter of fact, and he has agreed to come onto our show next week and not only explain why he nominated and what he thinks he'll bring to the table if he's elected, but also he will tell us about his experience with the Independent Nominations Committee, and maybe the two of you can tell all of us on air whether there's any similarities in what you experienced and what he's now experienced. So it'll be a very interesting interview that we have with Bedri next week, live on Blue Sunday, next Sunday at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd probably just add to that we're not endorsing any candidates here, are we, Vince? Essentially, we're just painting a picture for our viewers or listeners to what goes on, and they can make up whatever mind they want.
Of course.
We're just giving them a behind-the-scenes view.
I would have to say that what we do stand for is that it should be welcomed and not condemned for people to want to offer the club their services. I mean, if someone decides that they want to offer their services up, there's no monetary advantage. There's no, or there shouldn't be, for being on the board. There's no direct payment of any sort from the club to any of the directors that I'm aware of, apart from Greg Williams, who's apparently being paid to be there because he's got a day-to-day executive role, I believe. So he's not just a director; he's actually an employee of the club as well, which is interesting in itself. But nevertheless, put that aside for a second. What the directors are meant to be is volunteers, volunteering their time and their skills and their knowledge for the benefit of the club. Now, if someone like Bedri or you or me or anyone else decides that they want to do that, why is this not being welcomed? Why is this not receiving a tick of approval? Why is anybody who has stood for election so far since the inception of this in the so-called Independent Nominations Committee, which is apparently there to assess the skill set and suitability of any candidate to go onto the board? Isn't it amazing, hey? Not one person so far has ever been endorsed by this Independent Nominations Committee to take a position in preference to anyone that's already on the board. Oh, is that a surprise to anybody?
I'll jump in there.
Yeah.
not one candidate has been jointly endorsed with another.
Yeah.
Meaning, now where I'm going with that is, if there are 3 spots,
Yeah.
and whoever you want to, whichever corporate person that has carries weight with people, let's call it. Let's just use an example. Okay, nominates that person should also, if they have the skills.
Yeah.
So you could have the list of the 5 candidates or 4 candidates, and there may be 3 spots. They should, if they're all good enough, they should all be approved.
Yeah.
And let the members decide.
But you see, the problem is, Steve, that when they set up this independent nominations committee, the whole basis of this was to say to the members, look, you people are all dumb. You can't work it out for yourselves as to who should be on the board and who shouldn't. So we'll set up a committee that's, by the way, headed up by the current president. And alongside that current president, the other 2 members of the committee are the club's accountant and the club's lawyer, or former accountant, former lawyer.
Yes.
Who have strong ties with the club and the existing board. Correct. So this is your so-called independent nominations committee, okay? And we're going to assess the skills of anyone else that wants to come and upset our party. And is it any wonder that they haven't endorsed anybody? I mean, we have even seen a situation in the past where someone stood for election that had all the required skills that one of the existing directors had that was going up for re-election. And rather than say to the Carlton members, look, these 2 people have essentially the same skills, you decide which one you want. What did they do? They endorsed the existing board member in the interests of stability.
So right? that is.
I mean, really, what a farce. This thing needs to be exposed, and I'll tell you right now, I'm going to expose it as best I can to the Carlton members so that they know what shenanigans take place with this independent nominations committee. And the interview process that you went through and that Bedri went through, and I'm sure others in the past have gone through, this needs to be exposed as what sort of tactics they get up to. There was actually 2 other Carlton members who put themselves up for election for this particular AGM, and they've both pulled out. So out of the 3 that originally went up, 2 others pulled out. Such is the pressure, such is the psychological strong-arm tactics that they impose on anyone who dares to put up their hand to go up for the Carlton board. It's got to stop. This sort of thing has to be exposed, and the Carlton members should know.
Well, it was introduced to add another. In theory, it was introduced so you didn't have 4 lawyers on the board or 5 accountants.
But
whatever.
Hang on.
Right.
Steve,
in theory,
the existing board right now has 3, not 1, but 2, but 3 fund managers on the board. 3 fund managers. But one of the guys that put himself up for election was actually a lawyer. And Chris Townsend, who was one of the 4 directors that resigned in August, nearly 6 months ago now, he wasn't replaced with a lawyer, right? He was replaced by others. Those 4 people that left, like Chris Judd and Mark Legitiche and Jean Pratt, and this particular lawyer, Chris Townsend, they all left the board, but they were replaced by 4 people, none of whom had any legal background. So this particular guy that put himself originally up for election said, well, hey, I'm a lawyer. I have my own legal firm. I'd like to donate my services to the club on the board. Do you know what they said to him? Because I've had discussions with him.
Wasn't Dennis Denuto, was it?
No, it wasn't Dennis Denuto. No.
Okay.
For those of you who are fans of the castle. No, it wasn't Dennis Denuto. No, this is a very, very reputable legal firm in the city that he's a partner of, senior partner of. And you know what they said to him? we don't need a lawyer on the board. We're going to outsource all of our legal work. Yet, for the previous 20 years, it was the skill set that was required. And when they had a lawyer that was on the board, that was someone looking after someone else's interest there, that was fine. No problems. We need a lawyer on the board. But because Chris Townsend wasn't replaced by another lawyer of their choice, all of a sudden along comes an independent lawyer, Carlton supporter, Carlton member, who offers himself up for the board. No, we don't need you. And in fact, not only that, they talked him out of standing. So in the end, he didn't even stand.
But not just we don't need you, we're not endorsing you.
And we're not endorsing you anyway, even
though there's a gap. Yeah, there's a gap.
They told him, we will not be endorsing you even if you stand.
And before people, not to oversimplify this, but having a lawyer on there isn't just purely about, if you need to go to the AFL tribunal or basic things. There are so many risk audit, whole bunch of elements that they can add value in, right?
As a matter of fact, I think Chris Townsend, in fairness, I think his main line of work was in helping the club with
development.
With planning. It was a planning lawyer because of the redevelopment of Icon Park. But
correct.
Apparently most of his work had been done, so they say. That's why he decided to leave, apparently. But anyway, who knows the real reason why he left. Look, again, the hypocrisy of the situation, the double standards, the changing of the tune when it suits them. It's got to be exposed. It's wrong. And, this whole concept of condemning anyone who dares to put up their hand for the board, it's got to stop. It's just bully boy tactics amongst the corporate elites that sends off a message of how dare you think that you could be suitable for a position on the board. And not only that, I've got to expose this, because one of the things that I heard was that the question by this so-called independent, or one of the members of this independent nominations committee, was posed to the candidate. What makes you think that you're going to be able to beat candidates like Luke Sayers and Greg Williams and Paddy Kinnersley? Now,
I had that question posed to me.
Should anyone on that independent nominations committee should that question be asked? Is that what their role is? To pose questions like that? I thought they were there to assess your suitability and to assess your skills, not to grill you and to feed the thought into your head, the seeds of doubt, as to whether you've got a snowflake's chance of hell of beating, high-profile candidates like Sayers and Williams and to maybe to a lesser extent Kinnersley. That is just outrageous that a question like that would even be asked.
And it doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't be exposed. It's wrong.
Yeah, but in the main, most and I think we'll cover this more when we interview Bedry next week. I think it'll be a really interesting show. But more importantly, the perception that a director is purely about their CV is another problem, because
there's another thing. Yeah. It's all about your CV. It's all about your business connections. I mean, people said to me back in August, why don't you back down from what you're doing with your EGM petition? They've replaced half the board. What more do you want? Hang on a second. What did they replace them with? They replaced LeGiudice, Pratt, Judd, and Chris Townsend with 4 other people who are just of the same sort of ilk, the same corporate, elites that have got no common touch whatsoever.
Apart from the corporate elite factor, factionally,
Greg Williams was the only one like for like with Chris Judd. That's about it.
Apart from the corporate elite factor, though, Vince, factionally, they're plants of whichever family has control. So you're saying you're replacing them. These aren't independent people.
No.
These are
corporate interests are being protected.
They're warming a seat for a family at the club. So essentially, that's just a control power. If you've got 8 board members, you might have 4 and 4, 4 with one family and 4 with another.
That's it.
And there's your
perception amongst the Carlton members is, look at that. they've replaced half the board. We've got a fresh new board. No. You've just replaced 4 pawns on the chessboard with another 4 pawns on the chessboard. But the king and the queen and the rooks and the king and the rooks and the knights, they're all still there, all behind the scenes, letting the soldiers, which are the pawns, take the hits from what's coming across the other side.
And when something goes to a vote, as you know, from a political point of view, if you talk about what happens in Canberra, you'll have none of them will cross the floor.
No.
They're going to be voting for their family and their interest, and the others are going to be voting for their family and their interest.
Yeah.
And so are they independent directors? I mean,
no.
Sure.
But I've got to hand it to the club. They do a damn good job of marketing the perception that they want to create.
So that's why this INC is there, to intimidate and deter as many people of standing as possible.
Correct.
Because if they're a good business person or just a good, honest, they don't need to be a corporate high flyer. They don't. People don't want the embarrassment necessarily, or to go through losing or feeling that they're, not up to it. So they just go, I'll just pull out.
Exactly. And most of the time they succeed. You've really got to have a strong backbone and a strong spine, if you like, to put up with all this intimidation and to say, no, I'm determined. I'm going to put myself up, and win, lose or draw, I'm going to put myself up for election.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even the guilt trip that they put on you about, do you realise how much this is costing the club, and figures like $40,000 and $50,000 just to run an election. Since when does it cost $40,000 or $50,000 to run the election? I mean, they all do it online anyway.
Apart from the cost of the election, though, what's the cost of democracy?
Well, exactly.
Is there a price that...
Even if there was a cost, let's just say it was $20,000. Let's just say it was $20,000 to send out all of these ballots in the mail because we still hadn't got email yet. Well, that should be budgeted by the football club at the start of the year. They should assume that an election is going to take place every year. And if it doesn't, because no one puts their hand up, well, that's a $20,000 bonus.
That's a fixed
on the
cost.
Bottom line.
That's a fixed
cost.
They should be
budgeting for that.
Yeah, but that's a fixed cost. An election, it's a must-have. Otherwise, what football club do you have? Anyway.
Well, as you said, at what cost democracy? I mean, this is what has diminished so dramatically in recent years, and probably the last 20 years at Carlton, is that the worse we've become on field as a football club, the less democracy we've seen. The same interests have if anything, entrenched their power at the club.
Well, they're getting smarter because they buy people off too, which, again, probably a topic for another show. But they'll put influential people in, positions that give them a little bit of a sugar hit, and those people will then espouse the virtues of the current administration, regardless of how poorly they've performed.
Correct.
And shoot down anybody that even offers their services, let alone anything more. Yep. Let's talk about the other part of the notice.
I was going to say that. Why don't we talk about the other part of the email that came out? And in fact, finally, some good news, some really good news for Carlton.
Yeah, let's go through it.
Is that a new constitution has been put forward, similar to the constitution that they put forward in July last year, which I made the decision to expose because they tried to introduce a lot of power grab clauses under the radar. And, in discussions I had with people left, right and centre, no one was awake to it. So just as by way of background, I made the decision to really expose this through the media. And within a week or two, the club decided to postpone the extraordinary general meeting that they called in August to have this vote go through. Such was the outrage that it was being all of a sudden expressed by the Carlton membership because of these power grab clauses. So to cut a long story short, the club, after the EGM petition that we also put forward, calling for an extraordinary general meeting, they decided in their wisdom to not give us our democratic say in terms of whether we wanted this board to continue or not. They decided to lawyer up and claim that our petition was invalid, which it wasn't. But anyway, in order to make sure that it's validated, we would have had to spend a fortune through the court system, which no one in their right mind is going to do. So it just goes to show you that when put to the test, the club's board was not prepared to acknowledge or to give the members their democratic rights, despite going through exactly the process that the Constitution said we had to go through. However, what they did do is to invite us and invite me to meetings that took place at the club to discuss these constitutional changes and to hear me out as to why I believed that these changes should not be put through the even to a vote. And as I said, cut a long story short, they have decided to do away with them, which is a very welcome decision as far as I'm concerned. That the three main clauses that I had issues with, none of them are now in this new constitution. So I'm more than happy to endorse this new version of the constitution that they've sent out as of Friday, which doesn't include the three power grab clauses whereby a new president such as Luke Sayers can have a minimum of 4 years regardless of whether they've reached their 12-year maximum on the board. Also, that they can't invite non-Carlton members to be part of that board unless they've served at least 2 years minimum as a Carlton member before that they're allowed to be invited on to take up a casual vacancy.
So if you remember from a Collingwood perspective, we had the debacle.
Yep.
With the a couple of candidates.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so therefore they can't just invite anyone they like that happens to be part of their little network if they're not a Carlton member and have been a Carlton member, voting member for at least 2 years. Mm. And the other one, of course, was that they tried to introduce the clause that really was the one that triggered me, whereby they wanted 5%. If someone like myself wanted to generate an extraordinary general meeting, we would have had to have got signatures from 5% of the voting pool. Now, when you've got 80,000 members, you could potentially have all of them as voting members if you want to. The board could easily just, at the flick of a finger, decide that everyone that's a member, whether it's a 3-game member or an 11-game member or an international member or an interstate member, whatever, anyone can vote. That would mean you'd all of a sudden need to get 4,000, maybe more, signatures on a petition, which would make it practically impossible to ever hold the club to account again. And that was the one that I really had a major objection to. Yeah. And that has also now been eliminated from this new constitution. So I welcome that. I welcome the decision by Luke Sayers to back down from what was a blatant power grab. They clearly recognised that they got caught with their pants down on this. And thankfully, the Carlton members and their democratic rights have been reinstalled. And, I now, and the group that I guess head up called Carlton Now, which you can find on Facebook, Carlton Now is now more than happy to endorse this new constitution, which rightfully recognises groups like Indigenous people and women and their role in football.
So Vince, just to summarise from a philosophical point of view,
yeah,
how could the board have completely misread the room in August?
They didn't misread the room. They didn't. In my view, what they attempted to do was to sneak these changes through without anyone even noticing. Clearly, it was in my opinion, a blatant and quite brilliantly orchestrated attempt. Okay, because you really have to even to find these clauses, I mean, even the email again that was sent on Friday, they still require you to do the same thing. Press the buttons, go to this annexure and this attachment and read through a very litigious document. And, 95, 98, 99% of our members probably wouldn't even bother. Okay? What I think that they tried to do at a time when everyone's focus back in June, July and August was on the team and David Teague as the coach, what's his future going to be? Alistair Clarkson all of a sudden became potentially available. Everyone's focus was on the on-field side of Carlton Football Club. And what did they try and do? After yet another year of failure, after yet another year where we weren't going to make finals, they tried to slip in a brand new constitution without any major fanfare. The only thing that they did was highlight the fact that this new constitution was going to recognise Indigenous people and recognise women in football and all that sort of thing, all of the niceties. And they tried to cover up the thorns underneath the roses.
But also, the 17th of August was when the meeting would have been convened.
Correct.
Had it have gone ahead.
It didn't go ahead.
No.
And why do you think it didn't go ahead?
Not
because of COVID. Like
the worsening COVID situation.
The meeting, interestingly, when they decided to cancel the meeting about a week or a week and a half beforehand, okay, after countless radio interviews that I was doing and exposing all of this, what did they say? Oh, due to COVID, we don't think it's an appropriate thing to hold this meeting because, not everyone's going to be able to attend. So we're just going to put it off until next year's AGM, which is really code language for we got caught with our pants down. We tried to hoodwink you all of you Carlton members. We tried to introduce these power grab changes, which none of you would have even been aware of. And all of a sudden, down the track, when you didn't know it, maybe years down the track, all of a sudden you would have woken up one day and someone would have said, hang on, what do we need for an extraordinary general meeting? What? 5% of the voting pool? I thought it was 100 signatures. No, that got changed back in 2021. When was that? Yeah, they had a general meeting and hardly anyone turned up and it just all sailed through. Well, that's what I was trying to avoid. That's why I brought to attention the devil in the detail, because it's always the devil that lies in the detail of these things. And thankfully, we got enough media coverage to make a difference.
2 points to that. The 17th of August, nominations for the board close on the 1st of September. The 17th of August, had this new document have been ratified, and it
would have applied from that date onwards.
Yes,
from the 17th of August onwards, if the meeting went ahead.
So Luke Sayers would have essentially got that
4 years.
Year. Yep, because he was president
minimum 4 years as a president.
So let's go through the timeline here real quick.
Yep.
Mark Lajudice, when he worked out
that Carlton the email initially,
yeah, but when he worked out Carlton weren't going to make finals, he stepped aside in June.
Yep.
Luke Sayers is now officially president.
Mm-hmm.
No.
He never actually stood aside until just before they sacked Teague, because he didn't want blood on his hands again. He'd already sacked Malthouse.
Right. You're right.
Malthouse, and he already sacked Bolton, and he didn't want to sack a third coach. And he thought, well, Luke, if you're going to take over from me, get used to having blood on your hands. The first act of your new presidency will be to basically behead David Teague at the gallows, and that'll be your first act as president. And it was.
And market it as a great idea and a great.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway. Sorry, you're right. The point I'm trying to make is that essentially these changes would have benefited Luke Sayers and given him an extra year automatically. So he would have had 13 years had he stayed on as president to the end of his tenure, not 12.
Yep.
There would have been potentially different directors invited on than the current directors, because the directors that would have been invited on would have not had to have been 2-year, 11-game or more members.
Yeah.
Now, they've got to find 11 game or more members that have been there for 2 years or more that are their mates.
Look, what this clause.
So that changed the board dynamic. I would be certain.
Naturally, straight away.
Yeah.
See, what you got to remember is that the whole basis that they argued for that change to allow non-Carlton members to be directors was to open up the talent pool to literally anyone that they wanted to fill positions on the board because they have the skill set, right? Rare,
unique skills that don't exist in amongst 80,000 members. Yeah.
What we did by getting rid of that is to bring back the whole requirement, if you like, the historical necessity for this club to be member-based, member-owned, and if you want to be a director on the board, you've got to be a member, and not just for 10 minutes. You've got to have been there for 2 years. So this change, if they had been successful in getting this clause through to allow non-Carlton members to become directors, it would have corporatized this football club for good.
Yep.
It would just be like any other board of a public company. Okay?
Sure. Yep.
And it wouldn't have been that the Carlton Football Club is a member-based organisation anymore. It would have put the final nail into the coffin of what I regard is now the case, that Carlton members are customers. They're not members. They're not treated as members. We are member in name, and thankfully, because of what we were able to achieve, we still have certain rights and we still have certain democratic rights. And we've stifled their attempts to further reduce the impact of being a member. We are still a member-based organisation which requires people to have been a member of this club for some time before they can become a director. If that other change had been allowed, you might as well have called it the Carlton Corporate Club or the Carlton Business Club, not the Carlton Football Club, because that's the direction we were heading in.
Well, you become a season ticket holder, not a member. Essentially, and that was a comment made by Rob Earl.
You're a customer.
They want your money.
The only thing we want out of you, Mr. Member, Mr. Average Carlton member out there, the only thing we want out of you is, have a guess, your money. That's all we want. We don't want you to have a say on how the club's run. We don't want you to have a say on the board. We don't want you to be part of anything other than to pay your money, to go and sit down and watch the team. That's it. Now, they'd never say that or admit that, but in effect, that's what they would love to see happen.
And that brings us to essentially...
So general meetings and elections, like are about to happen on the 22nd of February, are an absolute pain in the ass to the Carlton board. They would rather that whole thing not happen.
For 364...
to allow them to run the dictatorship that they truly are.
For 364 days of the year, the directors are very comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
There's one day every year that any member can, Joe Sixpack, whoever,
fire questions at them. Yeah.
Fire questions.
But isn't it amazing how few people actually turn up to these things? I'll be very interested to see how many people actually, tune in online on the 22nd of February at 6:30 to take part in this annual general meeting.
Less people.
Again, the average member probably doesn't care too much for all the politics.
But to actually tune in online is actually potentially more effort than actually going there. And it's not something meaningful. You're not going to see other people. There were no party pies or drinks served afterwards, right? There's nothing. So
it's a very sterile, clinical,
It's procedural. It's a procedure.
Process. Yeah.
So that is the one day they don't like. They hold it. They used to hold it before Christmas. So the season previous was closer in members' memories, and it sort of puts a culmination to the year, doesn't it? It sort of puts a line through 2021 and we move forward, right?
We used to have our AGMs in December in order to sort of put a ribbon around the last season, whether it was a good or bad one or anywhere in between. That's what we used to do. Now they have very cleverly, in recent years, shifted what used to take place in December and made it in February. Why? what excuse did they initially give? Oh, our auditors need more time to, to cook the books so that we can produce, financial reports and all that sort of thing. Well, it was never an issue beforehand. All of a sudden, they need more time. No. The real reason why they wanted to shift it to February is, why don't you tell us?
Well, the sting goes out. The sting goes out of any issue. They're suddenly training the house down. People have been to 2 or 3 fully ticketed open training sessions.
Fully ticketed.
The sting goes out of any issue. It's now about, we announced the new leadership group.
Yeah.
We're flying big, hopes and dreams for next year, and essentially the accountability goes. So it's a bit like, look, politicians do it too, right? They'll announce when the election's going to be at the best time that suits them, albeit they do have to announce it within a window. Carlton has up until, I believe, around about round 1, or close enough to that, but based on the Constitution, to hold that meeting. So they push it as far as they can, always to that last week of February.
Yeah.
They've probably got 3 weeks to spare.
Look, let's call a spade, okay? If you're holding your annual general meeting in, say, November or December, because the financial year of any club finishes on the 31st of October. So you normally need to give your auditors the whole of November, maybe a week in December at the most, and they can produce your accounting reports that you need for your AGM. So that's why we used to have our AGM literally first, second week of December, well before Christmas.
Yep.
By shifting it to February, what have you done? You've taken the focus off all of those issues that people were fired up about the previous year. If you still hold the AGM in December, you're still looking back to some extent. You're looking back to the season that just happened. You're not happy because you didn't make finals. You're not happy because, and let's face it, Carlton's got nothing to talk about for the last 10 years. So whatever measures the board can take to take the sting out of everyone's tail, okay, and all of a sudden have everyone in a more positive, optimistic frame of mind when they go to the AGM, they'll take that every time. So what can they do? They'll hold it in February. When everyone's forgotten last year, we've had Christmas, we've had New Year, now we're looking forward. So the mood for change is a lot less in February. So if you're trying to challenge the board, you want to create an election, you want an extraordinary general meeting because you want to spill the board or do anything like that, your chances of success, within a month of the first match, I mean, this 22nd of February is less than a month before our round 1 game, right? In fact, I think our first practice match happens maybe 2 days after it or 3 days after it, okay, against, I think, St Kilda. So we've got a practice match 2 or 3 days after it and another practice match against Melbourne the week after. And within, I think, 10 days, round 1 I think it's on the 17th of March.
Yep.
So
3.5 weeks, basically.
The average Carlton member is sort of saying, don't worry about last year now. We don't need to change the board now. It's all, look, we're about to start a new season. Give them give them this year, see how they go. Especially when they've just appointed a new president, give him a chance. Even though he's been there for 9.5 years, it doesn't matter. So this is what they do. And the club knows this. The club's board is fully aware that if you hold the AGM in September or October or November or December of the year that you've just failed in, that there's far more aggro, far more of a mood for change than if you hold your annual general meeting in February the following year. I personally think it should be outlawed within the Constitution and that the annual general meeting for any particular year should be held before Christmas of that year.
I couldn't agree more.
There's no reason why that can't be done. There is absolutely no reason why you can't have your annual general meeting before Christmas. In fact, Collingwood had theirs where they had the election, they changed the president, they had the annual general meeting, they had the whole thing. I think it was on the 14th or 15th of December. And that's, funnily enough, the date that we were hoping to have an election take place at Carlton around about the same week, if it had been permitted. But the club's board, of course, denied us and therefore the Carlton members their democratic rights. So anyway, we're not going to go back down that track again. It's interesting, though, that, and as I said earlier, we should celebrate the fact that those power grab changes in the Constitution have now been removed. We have had a big win for the members and their democratic rights and of course, their rights to hold the club to some sort of account have been reinstated. So cooler heads have prevailed and common sense has prevailed, and I applaud Luke Sayers for backing down.
Effectively, though, in backing down, he will say he had no involvement in cooking those.
Oh, they're never going to admit or to create any publicity around this. It'll be ourselves. We're the ones that are going to have to alert the Carlton members as to what's really happened.
I'm saying, though, the fact it was tried initially, though, shows they got caught.
No, but he doesn't say that he had any part in that.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
He says, it was all news to me. When I first spoke to him about this in August, it was all news to him. I didn't even know it was happening. I never really thought much of it. I heard about the new Constitution. Had nothing to do with me. It was all Mark Legittiche's baby, even though it benefits me more than anybody else in the whole of Australia. Because I'm the one who's going to be the new president, who's going to get. Why would they
put that 4-year rule in?
What do you think? What do you think? Do you think I'm born yesterday? Of course he knows, but he claims that he doesn't. So, or that he didn't, I should say. But as I said, look.
He should have known. If he didn't know, he should have known.
He has backed down, and that I think he's done the right thing now by the members of Carlton. And I think the main reason why he's backed down is not because he's trying to be fair to the Carlton members. It's because they got caught with their pants down, and he knows that if he had continued pursuing these clauses, that we would have made life living hell for him, and so we should.
Absolutely, we need to. Look, it's very difficult. Boards have power. It's not just Carlton. It's a lot of clubs, but Carlton are very good at it. They have the power. They control the narrative. They control the media. They control the comms they put out. They control the information that members have. Especially now, when you flat out going to a training session, let alone conversing with other members. They control even Vince. They even control members' own views publicly.
Yeah. You
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They do that very well. They've now infiltrated many member. I'll say it, shows like social media, shows like ours.
Yep.
Similar types of shows.
Oh, look, there's other shows on social media and other channels that are just pro-club, pro-AFL, pro-establishment. They just all sing from the same hymn book. They're all drinking the Kool-Aid. They're all constantly pushing, whatever the board wants them to push. And, there are people out there that'll just swallow it all and they feel good. That gives them a warm, fuzzy feeling. And so they swallow it all up. A lot of people love being seduced, even though they get let down at the end of every year. So, they just can't help but be seduced again.
Yep.
But anyway, I think, just to finish up on this, it's important that members read this email, the voting members, and that they make a very informed decision about who they want to vote for on the Carlton board. Now, a lot of people say, I don't care, it's all politics. Believe me, these things are vitally important to the future of the club.
Yep.
If you don't take an interest and then all of a sudden you see that the club's been hijacked, like was going to happen last year before we got involved, well, then all of a sudden, you start to realise, hey, maybe I should have taken a bit more of an interest. The same sort of thing you could say about state and federal politics. But, unfortunately, this is the way of the world. You have to really take an interest these days because a lot of other people are making decisions about things that will affect your life. And if your life is affected by what happens at the Carlton Football Club, well, then I would suggest you take more of an interest maybe than what you have in the past. The other thing is you don't have to vote for 3 people, even though there's 3 vacancies. You don't have to say for example, let's just say you wanted to vote for Bedry, this independent chap who's put himself up for election. You don't have to vote for him plus two of the others, like Luke Sayers or Greg Williams or Paddy Kinsley. You can just put a vote down for him, and that's it, if you don't want to endorse any of the others. If you want to endorse any of the others,
or two of them.
You can have two. You can have three. You can have one. But there's no compulsion on you to vote for three people. You can choose to vote for only one person. And in fact, if you're wanting someone like Bedry to get on the board, it's in his best interests, and therefore yours, to vote for only him. Because every vote that you put for someone else as well means that their tally is getting up as much as what his is. If you want him to have an advantage as a result of your vote, well, then only vote one for him. Don't vote for the others. So anyway,
we'll
that's something we can talk about next week when we get Bedry on as a special guest.
And we'll also talk about in the future shows how the club choose not to publicise the voting numbers as well. But we'll talk about all of that. All of those. Again. Yeah, we'll talk about all those things. But I think it's important to give people a run. As I said, let's present all the information as best as we can and go from there.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Steve, I think we've done that to death for nearly an hour and a half. So I think we're going to finally talk about other sports other than AFL and AFLW. And I think we probably need to start. I'm not sure if you've got Luke having joined you yet, but
Luke's in the green room here.
Oh, he's in the green room. Well, I don't want to keep you waiting too long, even though.
No, I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure if I will try and.
I was just going to say we've got an update on the tennis. If anyone's watching out there, maybe you can let us know.
Luke is with us. We'll get Gina if she's out there. She was our resident tennis expert for the night.
Was she? Unfortunately, Debbie was going to be on tonight to give us a rundown on the tennis, especially the women's final with Ash Barty last night. But unfortunately, she's not feeling very well tonight. So we wish you all the best, Debbie, and wish you a speedy recovery.
Absolutely. Yep. Cheerio to Debbie. We will get someone, if they can, post us an update on the tennis. That would be great.
Sure.
Luke is with us. He's just popped out for a second. Actually, here he is now. Luke, good evening.
There he is, the one and only Luke Humphries.
From RSN Radio, Harness Racing Victoria, and a variety of other roles that he plays.
Yes, in fact, I know for a fact that Luke's going to call. Luke, this coming Saturday night, instead of being at Melton for the big Hunter Cup, which is, of course, like the Melbourne Cup of harness racing, Luke's actually going to be calling a race meeting over in Horsham for the Greyhounds, Luke. That's like turning the clock back to when you were at Horsham to call the Horsham Cup in the Greyhounds a couple of years back.
Yeah, I just need to fill in for a few people, I think. So I've got a few dog meetings coming up, which isn't too bad, actually, because you probably just get sick of calling one code, to be honest, even though harness racing is probably my favourite. Yeah.
It's nice. It's nice to have a bit of variety.
It is, yeah. I'd like to call all three codes at once, but
yeah.
Anyway, we'll go and call.
As someone said to me once, eating lobster is absolutely delicious, but if you have it every night of the week, you start getting sick of it. And sometimes it's nice to have fish and chips.
Yeah. But anyway, I'll be first up for 3 years. So
3 years.
Last time I called a dog race was April 2019. So.
Well, there you go. That is almost 3 years ago. Yep.
Yeah. Plenty of harness action, obviously, that I'm sure about.
Luke,
I've got the tennis score here if you want it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, could you give us the tennis score? And I've got a question for you before we start, Luke, but give us the tennis score first.
Yeah. So the Russian bloke has won the first set,
Medvedev
6-2.
Yeah.
And they're just in the middle of the second set at the moment. And it's 5-5.
So 5-all.
This is the 11th game in the second set, and Nadal's 15 up. 15
okay, 15 love. All right, so it's all square in the second set. Yeah. Geez, I tell you what, if Nadal loses this second set, he's going to have his work cut out for him to win over 5 sets. He's going to want to pull out all stops to win this set and tie it all up to one set all.
That'll test his fitness after sort of that.
It certainly will.
About a COVID he had. Luke, I've just got a question regarding the dogs. So will you practice? At all the shall we say using the different terminology, or will it just be like jumping back on the bike and riding it, even though it's been that long?
That's probably the way of putting it, Steve. Yeah, I think, even Dan Maleki's done a few dog meetings in recent times, and when he probably first started doing them on a little bit more of a regular basis about 15 months ago, probably the first time he's called dogs in 20 years. But it's a bit like that with, I'd say, with us race callers. I mean, you can probably stop doing it, but it's a bit like, probably getting on your bike and riding it. You sort of don't forget how to do it. So, I think we'll be right, hopefully, on Saturday night. And, hopefully we don't make
I can tell you, Steve, from personal experience.
It's actually funny. I was just going to say, it's funny. There's a lot of people that think I'm a better greyhound commentator than I'm a harness commentator.
Well, I wasn't going to say that because I think you're a brilliant harness broadcaster and race caller. But Luke is really amazingly accurate and spot on with his timing of greyhound calls as well. And how he,
well, at least I was 3 years ago.
How he adjusts from one to the other, I just don't know how you do. You've
almost
got to
3 years ago.
What's that?
At least I was 3 years ago.
Yeah, well, this Saturday night we'll put that to the test. You might be a bit rusty after 3 years out of it.
Oh no, I'm looking forward to it because it
should be good.
The one thing that I sort of detest about today is that you sort of get pigeonholed to one code. So I'd love to do all three at once, but that doesn't really happen these days. Bill Collins would do the races on the Saturday Arvo and then do the showgrounds on the or the Moonee Valley Trot Saturday night, and the Olympic Park Dogs on Monday night. But those days are sort of gone.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah.
Well, they were the great days, weren't they, Steve? They used to have the trots at Moonee Valley on a Saturday night back in the days of Mary Hardy and Mike Williamson and all of that, or Bill Collins, who used to host those shows on a Saturday night back in the 70s.
Yep, and then the Olympic Park Dogs. That definitely, and it's
and the showgrounds back even earlier than that. The Melbourne showgrounds
at Flemington. Yes, correct. Yep.
So anyway, it's been a long time since we've seen harness racing. In fact, even back in metropolitan Melbourne, because back in 2010, the last harness race was conducted, or the last meeting was conducted at Moonee Valley. And of course, the late great Gavin Lang was the driver who drove the last winner at Moonee Valley. Ironically, I can't believe it that in about
I think it was in the True Roman colours as well, wasn't it?
Yes, and just short of 3 months from now, it'll be already 2 years since he sadly passed away from a blood cancer disorder that he had. So, they were the days at Moonee Valley, but it's already been nearly 12 years since we had a race at Moonee Valley. So, geez, time flies. Melton first started in July of 2009. They kept Moonee Valley going for I think it was about another 9 months or so, roughly, maybe 9 or 10 months. But so around about, I think, was it about April 2010, Luke? Might have been March or April.
February.
Oh, February, was it? Okay, well, there you go. So February 2010 was the last meeting at Moonee Valley before they made it full-time at Melton.
Look, Luke, has the model of Menangle and also Melton worked, do you believe, for Victoria and New South Wales? Do you believe, I know you can't say too much, obviously, based on your employer and so forth, but what do you think? The distance is a long way out from certain parts of the CBDs, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I don't know.
It's a different age, though, Steve. I mean, can I just interject there for a second, mate? Yeah. These days, a lot of people are doing their punting from their phones, from pubs, from clubs, even their own lounge rooms. You don't need to be at the track. I don't think that there's any major emphasis anymore. I mean, there's still people at Harness Racing Victoria that talk about on-track patronage, but I don't think it's really all that important to them, to be honest. I mean, even
it's more for the country
through these last couple of years. What's that?
It's more for the country venues, the patronage as such.
Well, yeah, but we've even seen in the last couple of years with COVID that you can still televise thoroughbred meetings, harness meetings, greyhound meetings, and not have a crowd, and it doesn't really affect anything too much from a visual point of view when you're looking at Sky Channel. Of course, on track it affects things, but I'm not really sure that there's much of a priority on on-field patronage anymore. I don't think that they would have made decisions like going out to Melton with on-field patronage or on-track patronage as their priority. What do you reckon, Luke? I'll let you answer this question.
Look, I probably look, I think they, at the end of the day, they had to sell Moonee Valley from a harness racing perspective, or get out of Moonee Valley from a harness racing perspective, because I think it was the rent or something. They were going to go broke.
Yeah, they didn't sell Moonee Valley. They didn't sell Moonee Valley because the reason they moved out of there was because it was costing them a fortune in rent.
Yeah,
they only ever leased it. They only ever leased it. And unlike New South Wales, which owned Harold Park, and they sold it for a squillion, and injected many millions of dollars into the industry as a result. Unfortunately, in Victoria, we didn't have that luxury. We didn't own Moonee Valley. We only ever used the trotting track inside of the thoroughbred track.
Yeah, well, yeah, look, at the end of the day, no one was... Oh, I can't comment, really, because from what I'm meant to believe, there was hardly anyone going to Moonee Valley at the end. It was like, your typical 50, 100, whatever people. And it's not like there's many people that go to the thoroughbreds on a Saturday now, like in the middle of winter. So, I think the whole thing about crowds, I don't know. I mean,
it's still a great day at the races if you go. If you go there, it's still an enjoyable experience. But seems to me like the punting side of it, you don't need to be on the track like you used to be punting with a bookmaker.
Pretty much not, unless you're sort of betting in the run and you want to get a couple of seconds advantage. The whole crowd thing, I don't know. It seems to be, a lot of off-course. Seems to be a bit of an off-course sport these days, in my opinion, which is a bit disappointing. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a further drive from the city, but as I say, it's not like the thoroughbreds are getting massive crowds every week. So so to speak, if the trots was all of a sudden to go back into the city, I'm not sure if it necessarily improved the crowds, because if people aren't going to the thoroughbred, well, I don't think as many people go to the thoroughbreds, week in, week out is what they do, like a lot of things. So, it doesn't really bother me either way.
Steve, by the way, one of the things that you may not be aware of, Steve, that you might not be aware of this fact that's sort of crept into the race calling scenario in one particular state in Australia, but you've got a couple of harness clubs which haven't been able to muster up enough horses to compete in enough races to justify a meeting on their own. So now you're seeing a meeting which is a combination of what two clubs have put together. So I'll tell you straight. It's
Oyen. I've seen Oyen do that. I've seen Oyen host meetings at other venues and others.
That's different. That's different. About Oyen's meeting being hosted at Melton. No. What I'm saying here is that you'll see a meeting called South Australia, and when you look into it, you'll see 4 races at Port Pirie, only 4, and another 4 races, which will be races 5 to 8. They'll be at Mount Gambier. And so it's two clubs that are coming together to pull what they can muster up and create one meeting as a result of it, because really a 4-race meeting wouldn't stand up. They'd have to cancel the entire thing. So even just to keep their clubs going, they've got to do things like that. And so what you've got now, and from a race calling point of view, as Luke can tell you, is that they've got one race caller based in, where's Brisbane. He based, Luke? Brisbane. Well, and he's calling those races in South Australia from some studio in Brisbane.
There's 2 studios. There's
Sky Channel.
3. They either call them out of Sydney at Sky Channel, or they call them out of Brisbane at the Brisbane Sky Channel studio, or the Brisbane equivalent of 3UZ or RSN. Or there's actually a studio at the Toowoomba Racecourse, and it actually might even actually be the actual racecourse box there at the Toowoomba Thoroughbreds. And it's they're a very remote commentary, so to speak.
So that's for just for those meetings, those
just
mixed meetings.
Mount Gambier Greyhounds as well.
Yeah.
Right. There were a few more meetings during COVID, but for some reason that sort of seems to have disappeared, which don't get me wrong, as a race caller, you'll have to be on course, but from a logistical or management point of view, I don't really understand why they sort of stopped doing it, to be honest. I probably shouldn't say that too loudly, but anyway, probably a good thing.
Actually, Luke, if my memory serves me correctly, Freddie Hastings, who's the main race caller in New South Wales over at Menangle, there was one night where he was calling races at Menangle, and there was another meeting at Newcastle on the same night, and he was actually required to call each of the races from the different venues. I'm not even sure whether he was at Menangle or whether he was just in the studio calling the two different meetings. He was in the studio. There you go.
Yeah, from about late March 2020 to early October 2020. Hey,
unheard of beforehand.
For about late March 2020 to early October 2020, every trot meeting in Sydney was called out of the studio in either Brisbane or Sydney.
Unbelievable.
And there was one night there. They had Group 1 races. I think it was the regional championships. I just put in. They had a Group 1 race at Newcastle and a Group 1 race at Menangle. And Fred called a Group 1 race at Menangle and a Group 1 race at Newcastle. He's called two Group 1 races on the one night at two separate tracks.
And he wasn't even there for either of them.
No. But how's that, calling two Group 1 races on one day at two separate tracks? I reckon that'd have to be a record. Of course, it's something that happens in Europe quite often, the remote commentary type of thing. But
but off the TV,
your non-English speaking countries.
Yeah, off the TV, I understand obviously how experienced you callers are and your knowledge of the horses and so forth and calling. But surely there's got to be some advantages of being there, or is it?
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
Oh, no, there is, because if something happens out of shot, well, you can't see it, can you?
Yeah.
If the screen goes down, heaven forbid.
Imagine if the screen goes down and you're relying on a screen.
Yeah, if the screen goes down, you're probably a 6-letter word that starts with F. To be truthful. But in saying that, it's probably easier to. I mean, I use a fair bit of the screen, even though I call on course. I use a bit of everything: binoculars, screen, naked eye. It's probably in many ways easier to call off the screen. But don't get me wrong, if you got to be there, sort of. Well, I think you have to be there, because if something happens and you don't, I mean, it's probably a good example of it the other week. And there was when I was doing the form for somewhere, probably Hamilton or some track like that the other week. It must have been Hamilton Cup Day actually, and I was doing the form and going through a few results from one of the the dual Port Pirie Mount Gambier South Australia meetings, and there was a fall in one of these races at Mount Gambier, and Ben Hall and Jared Wessel are the two commentators that primarily do the dual both meetings, or the Mount Gambier Port Pirie dual meeting, or the Mount Gambier Dogs, and there was a fall with about a lap and a quarter to go in this Mount Gambier trot race, and they've gone out of shot naturally. But I think it was Ben that was calling, but he would not have been able to work out whether the race the race kept on going, but it's not like you can say, oh, so and so's got to their feet, that horse has got up, because naturally when there's a fall, the camera goes straight off it. But as the commentator, you then can't, if you're not there, you then can't say so and so. And I think that's probably and that's not the commentator's fault. They can't do anything about that.
As a matter of fact, Steve, there's such a paranoia now amongst the racing fraternity about race falls and horses, injuring themselves or even, potentially having to be put down and all that sort of thing, because of the animal liberationists and all of those people that want to ban racing, etc. The minute there's a fall, bang, as Luke said, the camera goes off it. They don't televise it anymore. In fact, even if you go onto your apps, whether it's, say it's a TAB app, for example, if you want to go back and look at the replay of that race, quite often they won't even show you the replay, or if they do,
cut it out.
They'll cut out that little segment of the race so that you don't see the nasty fall that happened in the home straight or whatever it might be. So, isn't it amazing that? And they expect these race callers to call the entire race, watching the screen out of some studio in Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane, instead of being on track. I just think they have to be on track. The day that they force all race callers not to be on track, I think there'll be a sad day.
No, I think. Well, to be honest, I shouldn't. Well, I thought if it was ever going to happen, it would have happened a couple of years ago because they did it for a long time at certain venues, but then they stopped doing it. Which, as I say, from a management perspective, I mean, I don't understand why they sort of did. But as a caller, I've got to be happy I'm still going on course.
But Luke, don't you have obligations on track apart from what you do for Sky Channel and RSN and all that sort of thing, control the radio and television meetings? Don't you have obligations to be on track to talk to people on course about what's going on?
Studio.
Can you do that?
Yeah, it's quite scary. Definitely from the Sydney studio they had there at Sky Channel, the commentators could control the on-course public address from the studio. You know, whether it's
the tech sets it all up, don't they? On course, they set up. Yeah.
Oh, look, it's
so they control what you're saying. So I tell you what, isn't that indicative of the world we're living in now? So there's censorship going on everywhere, even at the race calling industry.
Well, yeah. Apparently, somehow, I still can't work out how they do it. It's quite remarkable, I think. But yeah, apparently, the reason why, apparently the on-course public address, can be controlled by the race caller from from whatever studio it is, thousands of kilometres away. And
wow,
they just, it's quite remarkable.
All right, look,
but no, look, you can still do it. But I think they sort of have to have a commentator from the studio for the South Australia meetings because it's two meetings in one, and it's one meeting, but you got two meetings in one, but it's one meeting. So I think you sort of got to have the one race caller. So I can understand why they do the sort of remote commentary for that. But hopefully it doesn't come in other places because you're probably cheating the product as well. You're probably cheating the quality of the commentary and the coverage.
Yep. Well, my friend, we could sit here and chew the fat all night, but we must keep moving on.
We better not.
The main reason we got you on was to give us a rundown of what's happened in the last couple of weeks in the world of harness racing. We're right now in the middle of the Summer of Glory, which is the big carnival here in Melbourne and in Victoria for harness racing, and it's a little bit like what the Spring Carnival is for thoroughbred racing. Harness does it in summer. So the Summer of Glory, can you give us a bit of a summary of what's taken place so far, starting with last week? Seeing we didn't have a show last Sunday, let's quickly go back in time to Ballarat. What a fantastic Ballarat Pacing Cup it was, and a worthy winner. And guess who it was? Steve, have a guess who it was? Do you remember? Let me first ask you, who won the Bendigo Pacing Cup back in the first week of January? Do you remember who it was?
You're testing my memory now, Vince.
Spirit of St. Louis.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's right, yes.
Followed up the following week at Shepparton and won the Shepparton Pacing Cup again with Jack Callaghan.
Second favourite at Shepparton, yep.
Yes. And guess who came along and won the Ballarat Cup last week as a third favourite?
Spirit of St. Louis.
Spirit of St. Louis. Hey, Luke, what a fantastic performance by that horse and driver.
Yeah, and it paid $3.10 when it won at Bendigo, $5.50 when it won at Shepparton, and $5 at Ballarat. So, what's that? Hang on, let me just do the maths here because
those 3 cups in a row. I don't know how many other horses in history would have won those 3 in a row, one after the other. Well,
there used to be a massive bonus back about 40 years ago that if you'd won all 3, you'd get like a $50,000 bonus back in the day.
But they haven't got the money to do that anymore.
I don't know. I don't know about that. But there was like a $50,000 bonus back in the day. And if you won all 3, and Popular Arm went close to where he should have won all 3. You won at Bendigo, Shepparton, and then at Ballarat it was like 3 and 4 wide for the last 2 laps and got beat by like a metre or something. But then he came out and won the Ballarat Cup the year after, but didn't win all 3. So I don't know if any horse actually ever did that bonus or won the treble. But yeah, Spirit of St. Louis paid an average price of $4.50. $3.10 Bendigo, $5.50 Shepparton, and $5 Ballarat. Yeah, look, he had barrier 1. He took the set, had a lovely run. and he was able to sort of hit the front at the right place, right time, and win. There were some very good runs behind. Lochinvar Art were led early, then took the set. Then from Max Delight, who was really pulled his head off, so to speak. He pulled very hard. Wouldn't have been surprised if he actually choked down, to be honest.
He was the Victoria Cup winner back in October.
Yeah, and he went round and took the lead. And then Lochinvar Art went around him again. And then Expensive Ego came around, and he then got the front away from Lochinvar Art. Of course,
Expensive Ego. And Steve, if you remember correctly, sorry to interrupt, Luke, if you remember,
Lochinvar Art
Ego was the horse back in the Into Dominion final that crossed the line first, but lost the race on protest.
Yes, yeah, and Lochinvar Art was the coming back off the 12-month injury break as well.
Yeah,
that's correct. And
go on, Luke. Sorry.
And and speaking of Expensive Ego and protests, we might just quietly possibly be talking about that again a little bit later.
Yes, so it's happened again, Steve. Lightning has struck again in the same place.
Yeah, Expensive Ego probably led for about the last lap and a half, and looked the winner at about the top of the home straight. He kicked away, but sort of dropped back, and Lochinvar Art, who ended up behind him, as I say, then came out to challenge, and then Spirit of St. Louis sort of got into the clear and came all over the top and eventually won by a half neck. Amazing Dream was a real eye catcher, the mare that won the two big races in Brisbane during the winter. Also won the Kilmore Cup and was a narrow second in the Cranbourne Cup, and probably Kilmore, Cranbourne, Ballarat are probably the big three, along with Bendigo and Shepparton, maybe to a lesser extent, in my opinion. But won Kilmore, narrowly beaten Cranbourne, narrowly beaten Ballarat. She paid 20-1, Amazing Dream. And, she might be a big chance come the Hunter Cup this Saturday night. Lochinvar Art was third, Expensive Ego fourth. I do believe they were below par, and Triple Eight was a big run, and so was in fifth place coming from miles back, and so was our Us of Sam, who was one of the many horses that made a move 3 wide mid-race and set outside the leader for the last lap, and he ran sixth at 150-1. I do think Lochinvar Art, he didn't run this week, but he, you look at Shepparton, and I don't think I was on for the Shepparton review, so to speak, Vince, but he ran out very badly, or very concerningly, I thought, in the home straight at Shepparton. And not that he went badly at Shepparton, he went very well, but first up for 12
shifted
months,
out under pressure.
I wasn't very happy. I thought it was a very concerning sign, the way he ran out under pressure in the straight. And I thought he had every chance at Ballarat, and I do think he's going to have to improve again a lot in 2 weeks. An Expensive Ego was probably a bit below par before redeeming himself for maybe half an hour last night before the result was overturned. And look, Triple Eight, our Uncle Sam, were very good there at Ballarat, but it's going to come down to barrier draws. But Spirit of St. Louis, you can't take anything away from him.
No, absolutely not. And it's going to be a star-studded field really next week for the Hunter Cup. You would expect all of the main players to be there now, including, with any luck, King of Swing, former Horse of the Year a couple of years ago, who's back in winning form as a result of another free-for-all race last night at Menangle.
I just watched these.
Imagine having your Hunter Cup with King of Swing, Expensive Ego, and Spirit of St. Louis coming from Sydney, and then you can throw in Lochinvar Art from Melbourne, Triple Eight, which is originally a New Zealand horse but is now trained here in Victoria. And am I forgetting another? And of course, Amazing Dream, the mare. There's a star-studded field there. There's going to be a lot of chances in this race next week, the Hunter Cup.
Yeah. Well,
a lot's going to depend on barrier draws as usual.
King of Swing actually won in Sydney last night. I didn't think he was very impressive at all, to be honest. He got to the front, but he had to work very hard for it in the home straight. Not sure if you saw that race at all, Vince, but
a little bit rusty, but I think that would have.
If he draws poorly, I can't see him winning, because unless he leads, he doesn't win, in my opinion. But currently, you've got King of Swing as the favourite at $2.80 on the TAB. This is for the Hunter Cup. $4 Expensive Ego, $4.50 Lochinvar Art, $5 Spirit of St. Louis, or Spirit of St. Louis, whatever you want to call it. $8 Triple Eight, $11 for Willie Go West. I'm not sure. I think it might be going in at the Dean Braun horse, which went down to Tasmania and won a race there a couple of weeks ago. And it's $14 for Amazing Dream, and 40 to 1 or bigger for everything else.
Yeah. Well, they're the main players. I can't see why Willie Go West would be 11 to 1, to be honest. I know he went down to Tassie, but I can't see him being that short. Why would he be that short? I just can't
they're keeping him
understand
very
that
safe because they think they're going to take him to America. They have a big opinion of him.
Really? Okay.
That's what I heard a couple of months ago anyway.
Well, let's turn our attention quickly to the trotting side of things because, of course, next week, not only do we have Hunter Cup night on the Saturday night, the 5th of February, but on the Friday night, the night beforehand, we also have another meeting at Melton. So they're having back-to-back meetings at Melton. But on that Friday night, now I believe it's an all trotters meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the feature race is the Great Southern Star, which is, I guess, an interesting format, isn't it, in terms of who gets into the field and how it's run.
Yeah.
Do you want to quickly shed some light on that for people like Steve who may not know?
Yeah, it's
and
based
our,
on
and
the biggest race of the season in Sweden, which is the Elite Lop. Speaking of, very quickly, I have to mention, we're probably not going to talk about it, but I do have to mention that speaking of big trotting races in Europe, the biggest trotting race in the world is actually on tonight in Paris, a race called the Prix d'Amérique, and that's at about 2:20 in the morning. I'm not sure if anyone's going to be staying up for that, but I always do. But speaking of
I'll
big
set the alarm
races,
now for you.
What's that?
I'll set the alarm now for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Elite, but that's the biggest trotting race in Europe. That's actually tonight. But the second biggest trotting race in Europe is a race, or generally the second biggest race is a race called the Elite Lop in Sweden. And this Great Southern Star format is pretty much based upon that. So they have two heats on the one night, about half an hour apart. The first 5 finishers from each heat go through to a final about 90 minutes after the second heat. So it's a bit of a unique type of series. And then they run the twice in one night, probably within at the absolute most 2 or 2.5 hours over the sprint distance of 1,720 metres.
Yeah. How's that for durability, Steve? You've got horses taking part in a heat of which the first 5 across the line go through to the final, and then another heat maybe half an hour later, and those 5 horses, the first 5 go through to the final, and those 10 horses about 2 hours later or an hour and a half later have the final. I mean, you'd never see that sort of thing happen in thoroughbred racing.
No, it's the same for everybody, obviously. But at the same time, if the horse is endurable, and from a punting perspective too, I think you'd be looking at horses that qualify and just correct me if I'm wrong here, and going, I see something there. I think that they'll be able to improve, and other horses may go back the other way.
Well, last year we saw a great horse, a former horse of the year called Tornado Valley, which has been trained by Andy Gath and driven by his wife, Kate Gath, come back in the Great Southern Star, much to everyone's surprise. Came back from a fairly long layoff. Happened to win its heat from a front row draw at something like, I think it was 12 to 1 from memory.
Yeah, well, guess what it is? Guess what it is? Guess what price it is? Tornado Valley. I can't believe this.
What?
Not that I'm saying he can win, because I think he's past his best. That's my opinion. Guess what price he is to win the Great Southern Star after everyone was raving about him 6 weeks ago?
I don't know, what, 10 to 1 or something?
30 to 1.
30 to 1 for Tornado Valley. Goodness, man, they haven't even got the draw out yet.
They're all raving about him 6 weeks ago when he broke the $1 million, and he went off.
Well, I must say, at Bendigo about 3 weeks ago, at Bendigo 3 weeks ago, Tornado Valley took part in the sprint race, the 1,600 metre Maori Mile, and actually drew the pole, drew gate 1, and
he led,
but was swallowed up in the last.
Oh, he wasn't disgraced, but he wasn't
not disgraced by any means. But
I think the old
I'm Ready Jet came off his back and knocked him off, and I'm Ready Jet, of course, last week won the Cochrane Trotters Cup at Ballarat.
But I think the old Tornado Valley would have won. To be honest, I don't think he's as good as what he once was.
Can't believe he's 30 to 1.
But in saying that, Jesus, 30 to 1, I mean, it's nearly tempting after what happened 12 months ago, isn't it?
Well, funnily enough, Steve, he won his heat at, I think it was 12 to 1 or something like that.
Okay, I reckon it was.
Might have been 20 to 1. Something like that. But then in the final, 2 hours later, he started favourite and won.
Yeah.
So, the other thing about that is that how do the barrier draws get determined in the Great Southern Star, Luke? Is it pulling the numbers out of the hat, or do
what happens is
do the trainers get to choose which barrier draw they want?
Who runs the fastest individual times, and then you can pick what barrier you want.
Okay.
From memory, that's how it works, yeah.
So let's just say Tornado Valley wins his heat again. He can choose barrier 1 again.
If he wins his heat and runs the quickest time, he can pick anywhere between barrier 1 or barrier 10.
And is the final all across? It surely with 10 horses can't be all across the front line. There's got to be some back row.
3 on the second row.
3 on the so it's 7 across the front, and then numbers 8, 9, and 10 on the second row.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's next Friday night, the Great Southern Star in an all trotting meeting. So every single race will be a trot race for trotting enthusiasts. And of course, on the Saturday night, you've got the Hunter Cup, which is should be a crack field. But there's also some other big races on that night too, isn't there, Luke? Like I think the 4-year-old Bonanza.
Yeah, the 4-year-old. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the big 4-year-old race is on. What else is on? You got the
final of the sprint racing there. Yeah, the final of the Mercury.
The 6 furlong 1,200 metre race, and you've also got a Group 1 race for mares as well. So they're the big races on the program: the mares Group 1, the sprint race, the 4-year-old race, and then of course the Hunter Cup.
Yeah, Steve. One of the things that Harness Racing Victoria has introduced in the last couple of years is this series called the Mercury 80 series, where they have 4 separate heats run on 4 separate nights. It started off, I think, on New Year's Eve with the first heat. I think, if I'm not mistaken, or was
back
it?
A couple of years ago, it did.
Oh, did it? Oh no, it wasn't
back a couple
this
of
year.
Years ago, it did. Yeah,
that's right. I think this year it might have been Bendigo Cup night. They had 1 heat. Shepparton was another heat.
Friday night at Melton.
Ballarat was the 3rd heat, and then last night at Melton was the 4th heat. And so I think it's the top 3 in every race go through to a final, or is that
I'm
not?
not
No,
sure,
the top 2.
I think it might be the top 2, to be honest.
Oh, the top 2. I think
heats.
they only have 8 horses over 1,200 metres.
Yeah, they have 4 heats. They had them last year on the Country Cup nights, but they've had them on the Friday night at Melton this year.
Yeah.
The night before, you have Shepparton and Bendigo and Ballarat Cups. And then, of course, the last heat last night was on the Saturday night program.
But the 8 horses are all across the front for the final?
Yeah. 8 of them all across the front.
Instead of the usual 7. Yeah.
Over 1,200, yeah.
So there you go. Over this really sprint trip of 1,200 metres. It's almost like a stampede.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So that should be interesting next Friday and Saturday night at Melton. And that really is the pinnacle of the Summer of Glory there next Saturday night at Melton. And unfortunately, Luke, you won't be there because you'll be calling the Greyhound meeting at Horsham, but I have no doubt that you'll be keeping a keen eye on what's going on back at
Well, there's normally a bit of an after party after the Hunter Cup. So I think the last race at Horsham is just before or just after the Hunter Cup. So I won't be speeding, but I'll be trying to get back for the after party. But no, it'll be a great race. Who's your tip, Vince? Who's your tip?
Well,
until tomorrow.
Look, I've got to tell you, a lot does depend on barrier draws, but just from what I've seen of Spirit of St. Louis so far, I can't go past him. I think he's gone up to another level because each time he's competed in these cups here in Victoria, he's come up against better and better and better opposition, and he's beaten them all. So
and he's raising the bar each time.
He's raised the bar every time. And so, subject to a reasonable front row draw, I think he's got a big chance. But if he draws the back row, who knows? It could come down to barrier draws for Lochinvar, Spirit of St. Louis, Expensive Ego from a front row draw is very hard to beat. And, of course, King of Swing, again, if he leads, if he's given a barrier draw that allows him to lead he's almost impossible to pass when he's in front. So, the barrier draws are going to be massive whenever they get. When do they get drawn, by the way? Are they tomorrow or Tuesday?
Night.
Tomorrow night. So I'll be keeping an eye on that. All right, so the $500,000, is it $500,000 Hunter Cup? There it goes. It's hardly worth $8 million like the Melbourne Cup in thoroughbreds, Steve, but it's one of the biggest money races in the noble sport of harness racing. So, Luke, again, thanks, mate, for your time, and love having you on. And all the best with the greyhound calling next Saturday night. But, of course, predominantly you're still a harness caller here in the state of Victoria, and you do a great job of it, and look forward to your next meeting.
Yeah, will do, mate. And, for me, it'll either be Spirit of St. Louis or Triple Eight for me. Of course, Triple Eight won last night on protest in the stewards.
Yes,
but,
we did say we were going to mention that.
Well,
Expensive Ego lost again on protest last night.
Well, clearly Expensive Ego's got a bit of an issue in running up the track. That's obviously a bit of a concerning issue he's got. I thought
he's certainly been expensive, all right. He's been expensive for punters.
Hey?
He's been expensive, all right. He's been expensive for punters.
Yeah, well, look, just very quickly, I think King of Swing can only lead if he wins. I'm not sure if Expensive Ego is going as well as what he was during the Inter-Dominion. I still think Lochinvar Art's got to improve a lot compared to what we've seen. But if he does get back to his best form, well, he's probably almost unbeatable. But I don't think you can be confident that he is at his best, Lochinvar Art, from what we've seen. I think either Spirit of St. Louis or Triple Eight, because Triple Eight's really in the
they're probably the only two horses that haven't got any question marks against them.
Well, pretty much. And depending on barrier draws, one of those two would probably be my selection.
Yeah, fair enough.
But even, there's plenty of good horses. I mean, let's just say if Supreme Dominator draws barrier one like he did at Cranbourne, you wouldn't want to deny a horse like him a chance, would you? Or a Tango Tara or a horse like that?
Certainly not with James Herbertson on board, that's for sure.
Yeah. That should be a great
And, of course, the New South Wales equivalent to James Herbertson is Jack Callaghan at the moment, and he's driving Spirit of St. Louis and doing a fine job of it. And, in fact, last night at Melton, he drove another 3 winners to take out the driving honours last night as well. So he's in great form, young Jack Callaghan.
I just wanted to quickly run through the betting, Vince, for the Southern Star. So you got Mahesto Ozo, who won the Trotters race last night at $3.
Sorry about that. Yes, I cut you short on that. Yeah,
that's all right. Mary Law, $6. Temporale, $6. I think you'll be very keen to get your teeth into this. I'm Ready Jets at $8.
I really think that horse is the next dance craze from the same stable.
14, which I'm not even sure where he's at. The penny drops. I don't know what he's doing. We haven't seen him since the Inter-Dominion. And I'm not necessarily sure that sort of sprint, or the 2 races on one night probably does suit him, but I'm not sure the sprint trip does. But yeah, all the way down the bottom, you got Tornado Valley at 30-1. But and Queen of Crime, who won a Group 1 race the other week, is at 70-1. But looks as if Mahesto Ozo is probably going to be pretty hard to beat the way he went the other night. And I'm Ready Jet's probably the value at $8 in that race.
I'm Ready Jet for me, Luke.
Yeah. For sure. And of
course,
right,
my friend, we need to keep moving because we've still got cricket, golf, soccer, you name it. We haven't covered them yet. We've already gone 2 hours plus. So we're going to be going through them in lightning quick pace, even though they probably deserve a lot more time than we're about to give them. But we'll try and cover as many sports before the end of the show. But as usual, it's great having you on to talk about harness racing, and we'll hopefully talk to you next Sunday night again.
Yeah, we'll do our best, guys. Good to be on the program again. Good on you, boys.
And we'll review the results of Hunter Cup night. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Luke.
There's Luke Humphries and Steve. Let's give ourselves 20 minutes to try and quickly go through. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Hello.
Vince has just dropped out there. He'll rejoin us in a moment. We'll just quickly prepare ourselves. We're going to be covering cricket, golf, and also soccer or football, depending how you want to call it. So in just we'll pick up on soccer, shall we, to start with? And the Socceroos had their qualification game for the World Cup in their relevant division on Thursday night at Olympic Park, or formerly known as Olympic Park, Amy Park in Melbourne. And it was a 4-0 win over Vietnam. So well done to the Socceroos there. It certainly was a great spectacle. It's been nearly 5 years since the Socceroos have played at Amy Park, and it was great to see a full house, 27,000 flat fans, as well as some very patriotic Vietnamese fans as well. So really good to see Amy Park, essentially full of life, and the Socceroos performing on that stage. Essentially, what that does now is Australia sits third on that group stage, 1 point behind Japan, who were second, and Saudi Arabia, who are on top. So really, there's 3 games remaining. The Socceroos travel to play Oman next. That's a crucial game. That's a must-win game, and then a victory over Japan would, I'm not saying mathematically make it impossible for them to not make that top 2, but nearly make it very, very difficult for them to miss out. So really, the next 2 games are must-win games for us. Otherwise, if we finish third in that group, we go on to play the 5th place South American side in a sort of a one-off knockout game. So we want to try and avoid that as best as we can. So these next 2 stages are really important. Just some observations from the game.
I'm back, by the way.
Yep, I got you there, Vince. Got you there.
Sorry, mate.
You're right.
I had another interruption to the line.
That's
I
right.
don't know why it cuts out, but it cuts out.
That's okay.
You're talking about soccer, and you're talking about the Socceroos and their 4-0 victory over Vietnam during the week.
That's right. Yeah. So just some observations from that. Although it was a 4-0 victory in the second half, the foot was definitely taken off the pedal. However, there were some defensive issues that the Socceroos did have, and the Vietnamese team did create some chances, albeit they certainly lacked any cutting edge to test Matty Ryan, only on maybe one occasion. So we're going to need to be better when we play Oman. They're certainly a better side than Vietnam, and work into some form there. And obviously, we'll also have Japan back in Sydney in March. Just of note, though, an interesting one, and it does disadvantage Australia a bit, but it's just the travel factor. Aziz Behich got caught in a snowstorm and essentially couldn't get out of Turkey, where he plays in the Turkish Superliga there. So essentially, he couldn't get to Melbourne for that camp based on the flight schedule. So he was unavailable. It really does challenge us from our geographical position and where our players play in Europe to get them together. And of course, Graham Arnold, our coach, had COVID-19, so he was in essentially
how convenient
coaching remotely. Yeah, he was coaching remotely.
Well, we're still a point behind, aren't we? We're still a point behind Japan in that group, and it may very well get down to that Australia versus Japan game here in Australia. I think it'll be played in Sydney. I think
in Sydney. Yep, that's right. So those next two games are vital. Really, we must beat Oman, and then we need a positive result at home against Japan. Just on some other news, the Matildas were playing in the Asian Cup. A big upset. I don't have details. I wasn't watching the game, obviously, just live to air. They were defeated by South Korea 1-0. So in the quarterfinals at Asian Cup. Now, that was the Asian Cup where you may have seen the scorelines against Indonesia and the Philippines, and certainly against Indonesia, I think it was 18-0. So it's really the first team that they've been tested by, and disappointing that they've gone out of that.
Yeah.
A competition where they were certainly one of the more fancied teams.
Yeah. Yes, I think we'll probably leave it there for soccer, because really there's been a patchwork of other games in other competitions like the English Premier League and
it's in the international window.
Yeah, it's
the international window at the moment. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we'll cover the other European leagues in Italy, England, France, and Spain, and Germany a little bit more next week. All right, so we're at least still in there. A good win against Vietnam. We've got a fantastic goal difference compared to Japan. So if we can just make up that extra point, we'll certainly get ahead of them, even if we're on the same amount of points on goal difference. So
that's correct.
As I said, it looks like it's going to come down to that last game against Japan here in Australia. All right, now let's quickly talk about the wonderful game of golf, of which you are a specialist in, and your particular field of endeavour in life. What a fantastic smorgasbord of tournaments we've had over the last couple of weeks. And, of course, we've got another one coming up next week at Pebble Beach with the AT&T Pro-Am happening at that wonderful course there on the 17-mile drive in California, just south of San Francisco. Pebble Beach, one of the best courses in the world. But, of course, they're playing on another course, which is one of the best in the world too right now, the famous Torrey Pines Golf Club. And, of course, there's a north course and a south course, and they had a shot at each one of those courses over the first two rounds. But the third and fourth rounds have been taking place took place at the south course, the more famous of the two, the more difficult of the two. What a fantastic tournament it was, Steve.
Yeah, it was, and look, a great performance by Luke List. He's played in over 200 PGA Tour starts, and this is his first win. 37-year-old from the United States. It's great to see him pick up the $1.5
really
million.
A no-name. Hardly anyone knows about him, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, still to have played 200 PGA Tour starts is a great effort, but
sure.
not a player that is a household name.
Not a household name. Yeah.
No.
But I'll tell you what, geez, our own Jason Day, how close did he come? My goodness. I got so excited watching today when I saw him hit an approach shot with his second shot to the par 4. I think it was the 14th hole, and he holed it. It was an incredible shot. I don't know if you saw it, but
I did.
It hit the green, and then he had a bit of backspin on it, and it spun straight back into the hole. And it took him up from 13 under, where he was a couple of shots behind the leader, to all of a sudden be 15 under and share for the lead. But unfortunately, those two shots that he picked up there with that eagle, he gave back on the 16th and 17th holes, and that effectively ruled him out of being able to challenge for the playoff.
Disappointing for Jason, because all of the players that finished in the top 10 all shot under par, and Jason finished with an even par round. So, Luke List shot 6 under, coming from the clouds really to win.
That's right.
Easy in hindsight, but all he needed to do was shoot 1 or 2 under, and he's either tied for the lead or won. But that's the pressure of the final round. But look, on a positive note, great to see him back in form, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is great to see him back in form, because I don't think he's won on the tour for 4 years now, and he's had, all sorts of chronic back injuries, and has had to play in pain for a lot of that time. And he even, I think, dropped down to below 100 in the world. I think it was around about 127 in the world at one stage, because his form dropped off because of injury and all that. But now it seems like he's back to being pain-free. He's managing his body better. And, as you said, it's fantastic to see him back in form and playing well. And, the real Jason Day has come back to the fore, and let's hope he can keep it up and keep it going, and hopefully take that sort of form and confidence into next week's tournament at Pebble Beach. Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to that. And it's great to see the California Swinger tournaments now coming about. Weather's pretty ordinary in the rest of America, so good to see those West Coast swingers, they used to call it,
tournaments, and some great golf courses.
Well, as you said, Luke List ended up in a playoff, didn't he, with young Will Zalatoris?
That's correct.
Who's another up-and-coming player. They both finished at 15 under. And of course, Jason Day finished on 14 under. And another Aussie finished not too far behind a previous winner of that particular tournament.
Yes, absolutely.
Mark Leishman, 11 under.
Yep, so, I remember he won.
A couple of Aussies. And I think even, was it Cameron... Cameron Davis, I think, also competed and made the cut, and I think he finished somewhere near 5 under or something along those lines today. So he wasn't in contention, but he did at least make the cut and pick up an extra few dollars as a result of that, for sure.
Cover his expenses. Just moving on to the tournament live at the moment, obviously just monitoring the scores, but
I was just going to say there's another one in Dubai, a fantastic tournament too. This is part of the European Tour, of course, the European one.
That's correct, yeah. So Rory McIlroy through 12 holes in the final round. He's got a 1-stroke lead at 11 under par. The best of the Aussies, is Adam Scott, who's got 1 hole remaining. Yep, he's at 7 under. He's a 3 under round today. Yep. So look, if he can birdie the last, maybe an eagle, but probably be just fall a couple of strokes short of. Is
he in the top 10 or more in the top 20?
Yeah, tied ninth.
Tied for ninth. Okay. Well, look, if he can pick up a top 10 finish at that tournament like he did, I think last week. Also, there was another tournament at the United Arab Emirates as well.
In Abu Dhabi. Yep.
In Abu Dhabi. And I think Scotty might have finished in the top 10 there as well. So I'm not sure if you've got the results of that, but he's decided not to do the American tournaments at the start of this year. He decided for the first time in many, many, many years to compete in Dubai for these other tournaments as part of the European Tour.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Obviously, you're not gaining those FedEx points, but it's just a different approach. But he's focusing more on the majors. He's trying to get his game right, and he's maybe not looking at focusing on less is more, as they say. That would be more his approach.
Well, Adam Scott's now 41 years of age, and of course, his big breakthrough came back in 2013 when he won the US Masters at Augusta. It only feels like yesterday, but it's approaching 9 years ago. Can you believe it? And that was after the heartbreak of losing the British Open, I think the year before. Was it the year before in 2012 to Ernie Els?
Yeah. With that 6-stroke lead.
Yeah, that's right. He did a Greg Norman, didn't he? But, he learnt from that and came back and won a US Masters, and he's been one of probably our leading light really for the last 10 years, along with Jason Day. There are others coming through now, like Cameron Smith, who are now really taking all before them as well. So there's a lot of, fantastic Australian golfers that are taking part in not only the US Tour, but also the European Tour.
Absolutely. No, we're very lucky. We're very, very lucky. And every week we get to talk about one of them. There's always one in a top 10, whether it's in Europe or America, and sometimes even wins.
And I should mention Mark Leishman as well. He's also been at the forefront in the last, especially the last 5 to 6 years.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, look, we wish Scotty all the best over there in Dubai, and I think there may have even been 1 or 2 others in the field that were Australians. I think Wade Ormsby might have missed a cut in that one, but I think. There was another Aussie that was also in the field there at
Lucas Herbert.
Dubai. Lucas Herbert, yes. Now Lucas
5 under. He finished tied 17th.
Yeah, so he's done well, and he was the young Aussie that won in Bermuda late last year that we highlighted quite a lot on our show. So good to see Lucas Herbert there also competing well.
He also won. He's also won in the Middle East as well previously on the European Tour.
Yes, he has. Yeah, exactly right. So, he's a good all-round golfer, and I guess good to see Jason Day, Mark Leishman, Cameron Davis do well over there in California. So I imagine that all of those golfers that you're talking about now in Dubai will be heading over to Pebble Beach for that tournament, I would have thought.
Yeah, you'll have some, and then others may have some time off, depending on their schedules. Normally, I think, and I'm not sure of the field at Pebble Beach. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but Rory McIlroy, he would. I think he would be playing at Pebble Beach. You've got others.
Phil
some
Mickelson.
of them.
Phil Mickelson.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the real traditional heavyweights of golf, if you like. John Rahm was another one who was only one shot off the lead in the tournament today. He finished on 14 under together with Jason Day. So, he's the number one in the world at the moment. He's an awesome player. So I'm in awe of these guys, the way they play the game and how they can pinpoint where they're going to land the ball and how much it's going to have backspin. And I just wish I could play golf like them. I don't know about you, how well you go on the golf course, but they're just awesome. I am truly in awe of these golfers, the way they play. The best in the world make a heck of a lot of money out of the game, but gee, they deserve it in the way that they can, I guess, perfect their art as they do on a weekly basis.
Absolutely.
All right. So next week we look forward to the tournament in Pebble Beach, and we'll report back on that. Let's turn our attention now to tennis. We mentioned Ash Barty. What a fantastic win it was. Danielle Collins, gallant in defeat, really took it up to Ash like no other player did in that second set. It looked to all of us like it was going to go to a third. Ash, as we said, pulled back and,
Sorry, Vince, are you with us? Oh, Vince has just dropped out there. And just giving your tennis update. Lana has said Rafa definitely not looking good at the moment. So it looks like it is Medvedev's tournament to lose. And we'll just get Vince back in a moment. And I'll just quickly give you a score update as well. No, Vince is back now.
I must apologise for this. I had Goz actually contact me, of all people. I've got to tell him not to ring me while I'm on the show. Anyway, he obviously forgot that we're still doing a show on a Sunday night. I gather we're talking tennis. So what's the latest on the men's final?
I haven't quite got the scores up, but it does seem for more reports. Medvedev looks like he's
going. Scores up for you, Steve.
Yep.
Yep. I'll just do this on my computer now. Well, it looks like Medvedev has won the first two sets 6-2 and 7-6 in the tiebreaker, 7 points to 5. And they're 2-2 in the third, with Medvedev holding a 40-love lead on serve. So Rafael Nadal has got a mountain to climb here. It's not beyond him if he's able to, I guess, dig deep and find his best form. But it looks like Medvedev won that crucial second set. It's going to make it awfully hard for Rafael Nadal to come back and win now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that'll be interesting to see how that finishes up. I don't think we're going to be still on air by the time that finishes. So we'll be finishing up in the next minute or two. But I think we might just leave it there for this week, Steve. What do you think?
The only thing was the Big Bash final. I think there was the only thing we hadn't.
The cricket.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, we should mention that the Perth Scorchers had a fantastic win over the Sydney Sixers in the Big Bash final on Friday night. They did look in trouble, having lost their first 4 wickets for very few runs to start with. And they were looking like possibly struggling at one stage, but then they formed a great partnership in the middle of their 20 overs, and that took them up to a decent score. I think it was, from memory, around 167, I think, from memory.
Yeah.
And, of course, the Sydney Sixers then had to bat and chase down that total, and they then started losing matches hand over fist as well, unfortunately for them. But let me try and see if I can find this.
Yeah, I suppose the theme from this is a great effort from Perth. I mean, essentially no games at home. Traveling, and the challenges of that, and or the bubble or the hub where the games are played in Melbourne. To come out on top again is just a great effort. It just shows that the cream really rises to the top.
Yeah, I'll just give you the exact numbers. Well, in the end, the Scorchers actually made 171, 6 for 171 off their 20 overs, and the Sixers started losing wickets all over the place in their innings, and they went all out for 92 off only 16.2 overs. So, in the end, it was a comprehensive victory to the Scorchers. They were always the best team all year. They were pretty much at the top of the ladder for the whole time. Are you there, Steve? Steve, you're gone now. And anyway, so they thoroughly deserved their victory, I thought. And they've proven themselves to everyone, and held up the cup, held it aloft, and celebrated a great win on Friday night. So there you go. That's the summary of the BBL. The other great game that I happened to witness today was the women's Ashes Test, the Carlton, the Australia versus England match. It's getting very late, isn't it? And of course, the Australians made 9, declared for 337 in their first innings. The England team replied with 297 in their first innings, so 40 runs short of the Aussies on the first innings totals. Then the Aussies got